changed my mind on the whole Wednesday being a day off. I think we kind of have to just go until we get this thing done, and then no more videos for a little while. I think after this video, I might focus on short form, like figuring out what to do with short form content, because I think that's actually how we'll grow more quickly. But now we have like content on the channel. So one thing we do have to still film though is the next Stan Richton document reading, which I think I'm gonna keep the same way. Like I'm not gonna look at the camera for that one either. I'm just gonna read it. It's more of like an audiobook type thing. I think that's fine. Perhaps we get a different type of format afterwards, but you know, all the content that I read is still like up for grabs in terms of videos. So we could always just make another video where I'm looking at the camera saying pretty much the same thing, but no one would really know, unless of course they watched both. But before we actually started reading this, I want to just kind of throw this in here again. Given all you know about different frameworks of consciousness, how well does my video script argue its perspective? I need you to be what do we want? How do we want to go about this so that it doesn't glaze us too hard? Unbiased and impartial, and let the logic speak for itself. That's kind of, I feel like that primes it to be glazing. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll say good things. It's the question is, does it differ from how it responded yesterday, since there's been updates? And what is the specific language? Like how strong of the language as it compares this to other other cases would it be? All right, it's taken some time, probably because this guy's pretty long. Here's an impartial, logical critique of your video script based on the framework provided in the Landscape of Consciousness document. Nice. Overall, your script presents a logically coherent and well-structured argument for a specific, pragmatically defined version of materialism. Its primary strength lies in its normative framework, which attempts to invalidate non-physicalist arguments by explaining their intuitive basis, subjective experience, as a product of neural mechanisms. However, when analyzed against the detailed landscape, the script contains several significant logical inconsistencies and mischaracterizations. Nice. Here we go. Logical strengths. All right. Clear normative framework. Your core argument is a classic and powerful move against certain non-materialist claims. You argue we cannot use the intuitive content of an experience as evidence for that content's truth, especially when neuroscience provides a plausible physicalist mechanism for the very brain states that contribute to that specific intuitive experience. This is a sound, logical challenge to arguments that rely purely on the feeling of spirituality or separateness, or any metaphysical premise. Strong use of lesion studies. You effectively use, by showing that damage to consciousness supporting networks also disrupts motivational coherence and survival functions. You correctly argue that in the real world, behavior and consciousness are not neatly separable. Explanation of GWT as a recursive distributed loop and neural activity as an analog trajectory are accurate, and modern representations of these materialist theories. The logical weaknesses and inconsistencies, central contradiction, filling versus dissolving the gap. Your script frames its two paths as complementary. Logically, they are often competing strategies, right? Filling the gap, this path relies on theories like GWT and complex neural dynamics. A critic like David Chalmers would argue this path only describes correlates, describing the ending. Explain. It does not by itself explain why it feels like something. This approach aligns with type B materialism, which accepts the unclosable epistemic gap but denies an ontological one. Dissolving the gap, this path argues the problem is a conceptual error because our intuitions are a product of the system. This is a form of illusionism or eliminative materialism. This path does solve the hard problem by denying its premise. The inconsistency, your script spends the most time on path one, explaining GWT, PCI, neural dynamics, but claims the victory of path 2, that the problem is dissolved. The detailed mechanisms of path 1 do not logically lead to the conclusion of part 2. Okay. The question is, have I not made the sufficient argument to make that case? To address the weaknesses. Number one, in my mind, the progression is follow the gap, the filling the gap exploration, then arrive at the ontological implications that we're dealing with a conceptual issue rather than well, rather than what? A mysterious, unintelligible gap. And then point out that this is the same issue that dissolve the gap proponents, and that this is the same issue that dissolve the gap proponents are more cognizantly trying to pursue to solve the more clear conceptualizations. Is the logic that I used to bridge these not clear enough? Or was it only implied? Okay. So, misappropriation of the perturbational complexity index, PCI. This is the script's most significant logical flaw. You present the PCI as a key piece of evidence for your pragmatic neuroscientific physicalist framework. However, the PCI, I don't understand how, maybe it's because it's reading it through that document, but yes, the PCI does come from the integrated information. I should say this. Yes, the PCI does come from the IIT, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't also lend credence to the GWT. And while I only partially make this argument within the current script, I might get rid of this argument. Maybe I get rid of the PCI if it would actually be this inappropriate. Well, I only partially make this argument within the current script. The PCI explains dynamics over time. whereas the IIT uses it to strengthen a metaphysical argument about the capacity for consciousness. Thus, I only use it for what use it as evidence. Actually, I don't even want to use it as evidence. I only use it as a complement to the GWT. Not even evidence for the GWT, since it shows that it's, you know what, it's kind of implicit, since it shows that we can actually test whether someone is conscious or not via perturbation. Yeah, as the landscape document makes clear, IIT is not a standard physicalist theory. It is a radical non-materialist, or at least non-reductive theory with its own category. It posits a radical qualia space, shares many intuitions with panpsychism, and is explicitly not a functionalist theory. Right, you are using a primary empirical tool from a yes, as evidence for yes. So I have to ask, do you really think that the logic used here is inappropriate? It seems like you would need to make significant inferences about what my use of the PCI means in terms of my openness to the IIT, which I explicitly reject for its metaphysical premises. It's merely metaphysical premises. In order to think there is a logical contradiction here. All right, 3, mischaracterizing the panpsychist argument. Your script defines the strongest evidence for panpsychist interpretations as widespread. Okay, this is an attack on a weak anecdotal argument. Fair enough. Perhaps we should reword this part. As the landscape document details, the strongest philosophical arguments for panpsychism are not based on spiritual feelings. They are based on the failures of materialism. This is like their weakest argument. I don't understand what's going on here. The very hard problem your script acknowledges, and the idea that physics only describes the relational or structural properties of matter. I wonder if we should save that. Like, this was a... This is a very odd video right now because we have this whole intro section, but it does create a setup. Like, I feel like it is a fair setup, but 3. You're right that I should be more careful about that wording. while I think that the what is it called? The something of ignorance fallacy. The appeal to ignorance fallacy of panpsychism is actually one of its weaker arguments. I shouldn't say that any one argument is the strongest. Okay. Now, I do also make the case way later, the case against this appeal to ignorance fallacy way later in the script. But perhaps I need to make it up front since I am name dropping panpsychism. They are based on the failures of materialism, the very hard problem your script acknowledges, and the idea that physics only describes the relational or structural properties of matter, leaving its intrinsic nature, right, unknown. The whole point of the ontological implications of these, of the physicalist perspective is just that, is precisely that a notion of intrinsic nature, of unaccounted for intrinsic nature is a contingent product of the machine. Of the underlying processes, physical processes. By refuting only the spiritual experience argument, your script attacks a straw man. Yep, I agree. If that's all there was. For some reason, I feel like this thing isn't actually like picking up on the full script. And I wonder if it's because the document that I'm putting in here is so large that it can't. I mean, this isn't too large. But maybe it's large enough that like it is running out of context window. That seems unlikely though. Okay. So let's run this. Yeah, I might work on this intro maybe tomorrow morning. And maybe we start with dealing with the gap right now. You're right to push back on these critiques. Your reasoning is sound, but the logical connections you just explained are not yet explicit in the script itself. The issue isn't that your intended logic is flawed. It's that the current script doesn't clearly show the audience how you build that logic. Okay. On filling versus dissolving the gap, your explanation of the progression that filling the gap leads to the ontological implication that the gap is conceptual, dissolving it is perfectly logical. The script, however, doesn't state this progression. It introduces them as two pragmatic paths forward. This phrasing presents them as parallel alternative strategies, not a sequential journey where one path leads to the other. Okay, that's I guess fair. In the sense that, yeah, when talking about paths, you know, that gives the audience the idea that there's a split in the road. But by the end of this thing, we do kind of get to a point where we connect them together and create like a singular path. All right, let's see. Let's see. Let's see what happens. See, yeah, this is the weird thing. It always points to like things I say early in the document, which makes me think that it's not even like getting the end of the document, which is crazy. On using the PCI from IIT. Your point that a tool can be used independently of its parent theories, metaphysics, is valid. However, a more subtle and significant logical issue remains. You are using a tool designed to test a rival hypothesis as a complementary. I don't think it's not that simple. Yeah, you have to know what the tool does. GWT posits consciousness as global availability or broadcast, often associated with the prefrontal cortex. IIT posits consciousness as integrated information. All right, let's just see. Let's bring out ChatGPT here. Can the PCI be used as evidence for the GWT, even though it was designed for IIT, which is somewhat in competition with GWT? Yo, Daniel End, what's good? Standard the Mandarin. Nice, very nice. We might be reading through the script for the next video in a second. Yes, under certain interpretations, the PCI, the perturbational complexity index, can be seen as indirect evidence that supports aspects of the global workspace theory, even though it was originally developed within the framework of integrated information theory. Yes, the PCI is an empirical measure of the spatiotemporal complexity of cortical responses to a direct perturbation, usually via transcranial magnetic stimulation combined with EEG. I already saw a few phrasings I didn't particularly like in the script. Are you saying from your current view from here, or was it on a different thing? But please let me know. Let me know the phrasings, and let's fix them up. If the brain is conscious, then perturbation elicits a complex, differentiated, yet integrated pattern of activity across distant cortical areas. If the brain is unconscious, the response is simple and localized. Yes, so this is what you'd expect, even if you just followed the GWT. So the PCI quantifies the brain's capacity for both integration and differentiation. Right. Yo, Dharmadam, what's good? How's it going? Good morning. Welcome to the day, except your day is tomorrow for me, so you should be welcoming me. In terms of phrasing, I would never say it's not, it's... because that's AI speak. Uh-oh. Do we have that? It's not... oh, like here? Yeah, this is probably... did you see that, or how did you... Yeah, we've got 3 of those, so we got some AI speak to get rid of. The why consciousness arose and how it functions to regulate life and survival, that feels like a non sequitur. The last bit doesn't really address any of the 2 questions. These are the 2 questions, I'm guessing? So yeah, my first question is: did you see the video, like where we actually discussed this? I should, I should say. Yeah, no, I mean, this kind of follows. This follows with the homeostatic framework, but that was just one framework. The second one was, this does not completely solve the hard problem, and completely there seems misplaced. The completely is following the idea that part of the hard problem of consciousness was answered by homeostasis. Like, I think that the idea, like, I don't know if Chalmers had a good idea of why consciousness would arise out of evolution. And like, that's similarly a mystery that many people think about. So that framework does like close this unclosable gap slightly. I think like that's what I'm going with going that's what I'm using that word for. Because AI uses it every message almost. Yeah, I do have to watch that. I have to figure out what is AI speak, because yeah, I said this in a comment to someone, but I probably don't know the difference anymore. So I'm gonna write that down though. It's not. It's get rid of phrases. Okay. How PCI can also support GWT. Even though the PCI comes from IIT, its empirical findings overlap strongly with predictions from GWT. GWT holds that consciousness arises when information becomes globally available, when local signals ignite a distributed recurrent network across frontoparietal regions. Empirically, the PCI's high values in conscious states correspond to exactly this pattern. So the PCI's pattern of results is fully compatible with and arguably supportive of GWT's predictions. Right. Yeah, and I don't think we are necessarily using it as direct evidence, but yeah, it's certainly evidence. Okay. Should I start from the beginning? Should I start from the top? So the one thing I'm trying to work through currently is like how much of this intro should actually be me talking about the response from the previous video. How much should it be giving a recap of that previous video? Because technically this is a part 2 type video. Like, I think there only needs to be 2 consciousness videos on the channel, and this closes the rest of the conversation. Do you take it to be an answer to the why do we have consciousness is to regulate? Because I think the why is much deeper. To regulate is just saying what it does, I take it. The idea is that, so why consciousness arose is a question that's answered. And how it functions is like, this is also answered by homeostasis, but it doesn't, like, these aren't all the questions. That's why I wanted to say this. This does not completely solve the hard problem of consciousness, specifically failing to address how our underlying biology directly causes consciousness. I should say conscious causes our conscious experience. But in the previous video, which I'm not sure if you saw, we'd make this argument pretty effectively. Like we can explain how, like, what consciousness is doing for us right now and why we have consciousness today. Like we've answered both of those. And I would highly recommend you watch that video because it's pretty, I thought it was pretty nice. But yeah, this is why this is a recap. This is, you know, I'm trying to say this really in a really quick way. This is a very, yeah, I should say, to briefly recap. What it does for us. What do you mean the why it does that? Well, this is where you'd have to watch that video because it's the same reason why it's like, why does our, like, we know what blood is doing for us, right? Like we know that it's transferring transferring nutrients, but the question is, why is it transferring nutrients? And the way that you answer that type of question is you look at evolution. Like you look at what the selective pressures were that led us in that direction. You look at what the adaptations are doing for us over time. Like, how is it helping us not only survive, but also to thrive? So this is where we go real deep into what consciousness is, like how it's, like, we often think about consciousness as a just the display, but like it's just like some emergent other thing that happens. But it's in the path of your body and brain working to keep yourself in the green, let's just say. Like what you are aware of significantly affects other processes. Like we know that for learning, like as an adult, you have to be exerting a lot of effort to maintain attention on the thing that you're trying to learn in order for you even to learn it. But similarly, yeah, like when something goes wrong, like bottom up systems will force your attention on the thing that's going wrong because it's really important that your attention's on there. And once your attention's on there, now, you know, your different systems can start working with that information. So, how can the hard problem be partially solved? Sounds like the easy problem. Yeah, I guess that's a fair question. Like, you know, in theory, the hard problem by nature is not solved until it's solved. Granted, in this video and kind of in the last video, we kind of assaulted that intuition. Because it's not going to be, it's not as clear cut as like a single answer that closes the gap. But yeah, like I would say that an evolutionary level framework here is not merely an easy problem. Like it's like a pretty significant piece of context that points us towards the direction of solving what consciousness is doing. It sounds like you're explaining what it does for us. Yeah, I'm curious about okay, that's what I already responded to. Okay, that sounds like explaining the function, not the like telos. Some say science isn't equipped to answer the why, and I might agree. Unsure. Alex O'Connor raises this point too, I think. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the last video, but because there's a lot going on there. But we've got this video. This is yeah, I might as well just start. But feel free to speak up. Feel free to yell when something isn't clear yet. Chances are we'll cover it because this is I spent a lot of time on this. This is a pretty comprehensive view of consciousness here. While homeostasis explains why feelings arose, it doesn't necessarily explain why it intuitively feels the way it does. In this video, we'll explore two pragmatic paths to solving this problem. One that attempts to fill in the gap, and one that once again, okay, one that challenges the gap itself. Ones that attempts to fill in the gap, and one that no, this is we gotta change this later, because I don't go about the I think I kind of changed the way that I went about that one. Each logically derived from our current understanding of neuroscience. So yeah, I think people are primed to think that when neuroscience is involved, like, therefore we're never going to be able to answer this question. Like I guess my challenge would be to be open-minded about how neuroscience can actually allow us to answer philosophical questions about consciousness. Why is ambiguous on its own because you can keep asking why for a long time, and this seems to stop at the very high level why. Right. Oh, wait, the why. Are you talking about this one? This why? Because, yeah, this why, yeah, like this why is touching on a very specific view. Pretty much any why. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be more clear. I think we're allowed to use the wording this way right now, but we'll deliver. We'll deliver. Yeah, why neuroscience? In the conclusion of the previous video, we made a crucial pragmatic argument. I am not arguing for what is true in some absolute ontological sense. I am arguing for what is the most plausible, promising, useful, and communicable pursuit. I am not trying to say that a physicalist interpretation is certainly right, nor that a panpsychist interpretation is certainly wrong. Rather, I'm arguing for and according to the standards and rigor of empirical science. This is a reasoned bet based on abductive reasoning, inference to the best explanation. We aren't assuming physicalism. We are deriving its high plausibility from the mountain of existing evidence, such as how brain damage changes the mind, how chemicals change the mind, how scans correlate with the mind, all versus the lack of testable evidence from some extrinsic consciousness. Let's quickly go over some of the main points we made. So, I got to get rid of that. Some of the strongest evidence. So yeah, I'm still wondering if I should go this deep into a recap, because a lot of this stuff was covered in the last video. Some of the strongest evidence for panpsychist interpretations of consciousness is actually empirical, in the sense that there is widespread cross-cultural reporting of profound, expansive, and spiritual experiences. However, as we discussed in the previous video, we have discovered strong neural correlates for these exact experiences. These neural correlates, particularly involving alterations in the default mode network and global brain connectivity, explain why these experiences feel emotional, overwhelming, and open, and thus why. So this is a why where actually I feel like what you're saying here is a little more apt. So perhaps we have to be careful about this one. Explain why these experiences feel emotional, overwhelming, and open, and thus why people would report similar experiences. For example, when the DMN, which usually acts as a self-regulating filter, loosens its grip, information begins to flow more freely. Sensory and emotional signals surge upward, and brain regions that rarely communicate start interacting, which results in intuitive, vivid, and novel experiences. So we know this. Like, this is something we know. The question is, does this carry enough weight to describe why we experience, why, like, to say that, you know, why these experiences feel emotional? Overwhelming and open. I think this is allowed. Like, I think we're allowed to say why, given this. It's like, why did the rock move? You can't answer many. You can answer many ways. I wanted to throw it. This one refers to telos, gravity and force impacted. This one refers to function. Not sure I'm using those terms 100% correctly, but yeah, I think you get the idea of the path of mind. Yeah, I do agree. At some point, though, you get to this issue where you can't use the word why ever because it could be interpreted in a different way. And similarly, like you have that with any type of phrasing. Like I could infer a different meaning from certain wordings, and I could try to be as precise as possible, but then this thing's not going to be 18 pages. It's going to end up being like 25. So the question is how much, like for the sake of being accessible versus the risk of, you know, losing I mean, for me, it's a pragmatic risk of losing a viewer because they hear this why and then they're like, you know, but why specifically in science is especially notorious. Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm gonna consider this. Consider each why carefully from a scientific standard sense. All right, I will go through that and I will figure out which whys are apt and which should be changed. And maybe there's easy ways to change them. But yeah, that's a good point. To be clear, these mechanisms are not fully understood. The point is that we can see clear correlates between subjective experience and neural mechanisms. And once again, this does not solve the hard problem of consciousness, but we will get there shortly. So the particularly interesting point we made is that our experience of the world, ourself, and even what is happening in consciousness is affected by our conceptual understanding, which we can think of as an amalgamation of our memory, context, culture, past, etc. In this framing, our understanding predisposes us to experience the world in certain ways. Since, as we highlighted, our experience of meaning comes with an affective feeling of certainty, it feels as though what is in our conscious awareness is objectively true, even though we all know that many of our thoughts turn out to be incorrect. I like to say that we each have a subjective experience of an objective world, a world that feels objective, yet isn't a representation of some transcendent absolute truth. I will do a whole video on this soon, so subscribe if you're interested. This is a crucial point. No matter what we explicitly think our experience feels like, we cannot discount how much that feeling is shaped by our brain's learned model of what consciousness is and what it should feel like. So we can draw a crucial logical conclusion that will prime the entire spirit of this video. That will prime the spirit of this video. No matter what we explicitly think our experience feels like. Okay, so this is the exact same thing I said. When should I keep this? I think we want to keep the second one. But I want to keep these nice italics. Yeah. Because neuroscience provides a plausible mechanistic explanation for the brain states that correlate with these experiences of certainty, meaning, and spirituality, we have a physicalist account for why these experiences arise. Therefore, we cannot accept alternative, non-physicalist theories that begin with the content of those subjective intuitions as a foundational metaphysical premise. The content of the intuition is precisely what needs to be explained. Thus, we cannot use the intuitive okay, am I saying this one again? Thus we cannot use the intuitive content. Okay. I'm going to have to workshop this one. This is going to be a big fat to-do here. We cannot use the intuitive content of an experience like the universe feels conscious or my mind feels separate from my body as evidence for that content's truth, especially when neuroscience provides a plausible physicalist mechanism for the very brain states that significantly contribute to that specific intuitive experience. To be clear, these are pragmatic prescriptive arguments, not moral but normative, pointing to the very standards of science, logic, and semantics to which we are committed. This is why I use the wording we can or cannot say this, or we should or should not say this, rather than this is right, true and right, or this is false and wrong. We can say that a non-physicalist view like panpsychism is possible. We're allowed to say that, given that no neural correlation evidence definitely disproves it. Yet we shouldn't say it's plausible, because all the subjective evidence used to support it, like spiritual experiences or metaphysical intuitions, is more simply and effectively explained by the neural correlates we've already found. We can say that a physicalist view is the most plausible framework we have, but we cannot say that it is certain. The hard problem gap is not completely closed. We are still met with an unsatisfying mystery. This framework leaves us with two pragmatic paths forward to answering the hard problem once and for all. Both are derived from neuroscience. So this is also redundant. I need to look at that introduction and figure out what to do about it. Path 1, filling the gap, which takes the gap seriously and attempts to fill it, and dissolving the gap, which challenges the very premise of the gap, suggesting it's a conceptual error, not a scientific one. So I don't think we even do this. So I have to figure out a different way to do this as well. I'm at this weird point where I'm now more confident in the second half of the, or not the second half, but once we start getting into the stuff, because that's what I've been dealing with recently. I suggest that we entertain both of these directions at the same time. In order to fill the gap, our pragmatic next step is to specifically determine how the brain most directly facilitates conscious experience. What about neural activity actually causes our conscious experience? In order to dissolve the gap, our pragmatic next step is to explore and better understand neural correlations. Okay, so we actually don't do this. So I need to change that as well. This gives us a clear plan. Let's begin by exploring how we can fill the gap. In order to take the hard problem gap seriously, we can ask, what is the leading candidate for the physical explanation of consciousness? Where is consciousness? Perhaps what we are seeking is where in the brain conscious experience arises and how those neural processes give rise to the subjective sense of being conscious that we each intuitively know. Following Damasio's own framework, while the body is indispensable, providing many of the reference signals that significantly contribute to our conscious experience, the feeling of the body arises only once those signals are mapped in neural form. It sounds like you could argue for ontological economy or parsimony there as well if you wanted, saying these mind entities or whatever is imagined is introducing new ontology. Ontological economy. I'm curious, what is that? So we actually do argue for, can refer to the physical study of the fundamental nature of economic value, economic reality. Okay, I'm sorry. In philosophy called, which is a method for reducing the number of entities a theory commits to. And then what was I keep writing this one in parsimony. Extreme unwillingness to spend money or use resources. Kind of depends if you're convinced by it or not. I don't quite follow, but we do actually get to ontological implications here. Oh, the less new stuff you propose, the better in science. Right, like we can't just make a scientific argument here. Like what I argue is actually really weird. It's that from the science we can see that our very ontology, like the meaning that we experience, comes from these processes. And that's a really weird thing for people, because people want to, like, physicalists want the physical world to be the ontology, but that's not the case. When we're talking about meaning, we're only talking about stuff that is experienced. We're talking about consciousness. But what we can think about in consciousness is the physical world. And we can do that in such a way that allows us to make the argument that the very ontology to which we are, indebted, is one that arises from physical processes. So, yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a way to do this without the. I mean, granted, yeah, perhaps we go too strong with the experience of like the feeling of certainty and stuff like that. But that stuff, you know, we derive from like predictive processing and all kinds of like also physicalist stuff. So, where are we here? Okay, so yeah, following Damasio's own framework, while the body is indispensable, providing many of the reference signals that significantly contribute to our conscious experience, the feeling of the body arises only once those signals are mapped in neural form. This was the distinction we made between emotions and feelings in the homeostatic framework. Emotions are the organism's physiological responses, changes in heart rate, blood pressure, hormonal release, whereas feelings are the brain's mapped representations of those bodily changes. Then, according to Damasio, consciousness arises as these feelings are themselves mapped, when the organism forms meta-representations of its own body state mappings, giving rise to subjective experience. Okay, so I had a note there to probably say something else. So how can we validate this? We can look to brain lesion studies, which give us perhaps the most intuitive sense of which brain regions actually affect consciousness in significant ways. Damage to the higher order mapping networks we just discussed appears to diminish or even abolish subjective feeling. Patients can often still perceive and think, yet they report an absence of emotional tone and self-presence, what Damasio would describe as the feeling of what happens. When we lose these networks, we lose key aspects of our subjective experience and sense of self. We've seen this clinically. Children who are born with a brain stem but almost no cerebral cortex show signs of basic pleasure and distress. This strongly implies that the brainstem alone can support a rudimentary form of consciousness. We can think of this condition as an inverse philosophical zombie. They can feel, but they don't know that they feel. They are awake but not aware. There is no reflection or narrative self. Yo, Energy Dompter, what's good? We are reading through this rough draft right now. In contrast, damage to the neural circuits that sustain arousal and perception abolishes consciousness altogether, putting us into coma or vegetative states. Thus, in each of these cases, what we intuit as self-consciousness is gone. Crucially, these parts of the brain don't function merely to give us... So this is what I was referring to earlier with the homeostasis regulation stuff. These parts of the brain don't function merely to give us a conscious display. They are crucial catalysts for many downstream mechanisms. Damasio found that damage to key homeostatic structures also disrupts temperature regulation, blood pressure, and hormonal balance. We lose not just awareness, but also motivational coherence, and in many cases, the ability to survive. As soon as you alter the brain enough to eliminate consciousness, you also alter its physical structure and dynamics, and therefore its behavior. So we cannot remove these and still behave as some sort of philosophical zombie. We can complement these findings with lesions that don't eliminate consciousness but affect it in significant ways. Some lesions make a person ignore half of the visual world. Disconnections between visual and emotional circuits can make a familiar face feel like an imposter. In some cases, patients find that one hand acts on its own accord. In other rare, rather peculiar cases, patients remained fully awake yet sincerely believed they were dead. Would you say it's fair to say that you have arrived at an emergent position, to my understanding, which is Damasio's position, and panpsychism isn't something you'd entertain until further neuroscientific evidence is provided? I think that was a really elegant way to say, yeah. To say it, yeah. It's you know, some sort of it's some sort of emergentist position, like literally that what I was just talking about, our ontology, like the meaning we experience, like that emerges from neural processes. Like what we're experiencing, the information that's getting passed around in the brain, and the mystery is why that information leads to an experience. And panpsychism is something I would entertain if there was further neuroscientific evidence. Some people argue those injuries or inhibitions are effective not because they affect our minds directly, but rather the brain's communication with mind and brain, between mind and brain, or something like this. So I don't think this point is very strong. Well, what if I just said I don't think that point is very strong? Like that point already assumes that there's some external thing happening, when that's not like the whole argument I'm trying to make at the bottom level here is like there's standards, there's rules about that empirical science gives us that we need to follow. And so we can't start with this idea that the brain is already separate from the mind, and thus lesion studies could show that we're making a separation between the brain and the mind. Like that is a counter argument you could have, but it's not one that abides by the very rules of empirical science. We are assuming that we're following those rules. But not just assuming that, we make it clear that we're following those rules. That's why I try to talk about this stuff as rules. Am I willing to entertain recommendations regarding cognitive biases? Probably not today, just because we have to get through this thing. I want to read this rough draft. This is literally all I've been working on for the past like week and a half, honestly. So you're not trying to convince those people. This isn't a video that's trying to convince people to follow the rules of science. I want to have that video. Like that's actually a video that I think I should make soon. Like why even follow the rules of science? And we can do a really comprehensive video on that as well. But this one is like, I'm not telling people that they shouldn't be convinced like by any of this stuff. I'm just saying like, hey, we are following the rules of science. Like that's something that we are doing in our exploration here. But yeah, if someone doesn't follow the rules of science, then yeah, all this stuff could be like just, you know, really not compelling. But you know, a lot of the way I'm going about it, a lot of the direction that I'm taking here is in response to the response to that video that I just put out. Like, because there were a lot of comments, and a lot of them were pretty good, pointing out, you know, that certain things didn't completely prove the points I was trying to make. So here I'm trying to actually close the discussion in all these ways. So hopefully this should make a lot of people happy. But there will be people that are just gonna say like, oh, you're starting with physicalism, you're out. You know, that's gonna be a thing. But unfortunately that's just something we have to deal with. But that's fine. Okay. And of course, we know that damage to large regions of the body, even the loss of sensation via spinal cord injury, modifies but does not extinguish consciousness. These scenarios remind us that consciousness can fracture in highly specific ways, yet awareness can persist while its contents, coherence, or ownership dissolve. Thus, we start to get a sense of which parts of the brain are indispensable for consciousness, but we still have not discovered where consciousness truly resides, nor what mechanism actually makes it happen. It's certainly possible that these critical regions merely activate other regions that actually produce consciousness. So this brings us to the global workspace theory. Oh, this brings us to a leading candidate for filling the gap. Neuroscientist and fellow Stanislas Dewan, I have to get rid of this at some point, but I need it for my own sake, has been developing the global workspace theory, which shifts the focus to considering what mechanism makes specific information conscious. In this framework, consciousness emerges as information is globally broadcast across a distributed network, allowing various functional systems to access it simultaneously. Here's the full functional picture. What is this note? We should say something that makes it clear that mechanistically this is more complex, or that the functional picture is inherently reductive. Yeah, probably. Would it be fair to categorize this venture as more like showing how this position is coherent, more so than why this position is most reasonable? That's a good question. So I actually don't remember. In the previous video, yeah, it's almost like this position is most reasonable if you believe in the rigor of science. Like it's almost like that. Not if you believe in a physicalist notion of consciousness. It's like if you believe in the very like if you believe in the scientific method, then this is the most reasonable position. But it's also showing how this position is coherent, and not only how this position is coherent, but it shows how this position makes the other positions coherent. Like that's the really crazy thing here. Like once we get to the ontological stuff, like it's kind of checkmate. But that's just me talking. So I don't know if that's incredibly compelling, but we'll see. At any moment, various specialized unconscious processors for vision, language, memory, emotions, etc., are processing information in parallel. We respond reflexively to these, but we aren't aware of them. Within each of these systems, information competes for access to the global workspace. When certain conditions are met, based on attention, relevance, or salience, it's really end salience, a network-specific signal wins the competition and suddenly ignites, jumping to a much higher level of activation. In this framework, that ignition marks the transition from unconscious processing to conscious access. So what is this global workspace? It's not a single spot in the brain. It's a distributed network of long-range neurons that span throughout the brain and connect these different functional systems. So this is how the language center of the brain can broadcast information. That information can be picked up by the emotion sensor of our brain to make something that we've come up with in one region have some emotional significance. And it's not just when I say the emotion center of the brain or the language center of the brain, there's actually multiple different centers that are actually doing different aspects of this whole thing. But imagine that there's just a ton of localized networks all contributing to the global workspace, recursively. Like they're giving information in, they're taking information out. So this needs to be workshopped. The global workspace ultimately consists of various long-range networks spanning throughout the brain, allowing many different functional networks to access its information. While different information is distributed across these various workspace networks, the accumulation of all the information within the workspace constitutes a single integrated experience, like my experience of sitting here in this room. This information is sustained until new information enters the workspace. Ignitions from these various regions occur rapidly and concurrently. So yeah, it just needs to be workshopped to be a little more fluid. I'm not sure if I understand that fully. Would you go so far as to say you could disprove dualism if you accept the scientific method? Yeah. Okay, not disprove, but with 100% certainty. But you can you can create a really strong, like, I am compelled to think that that we can make sense of dualism pretty easily through the physical the physicalist perspective here. But once again, like, it is still possible that there is some unaccounted for source of conscious essence that is somehow affecting what's going on. However, on your helmet. However, we know enough about the brain that we do know that the physical stuff does affect, like, certain specific aspects of our experience, such as the very meaning we experience, like the very content of my thoughts. Like when I was about to pick up something that wasn't a pen. This is a mayday. My understanding of a pen, like we know, is coming from memory parts of my brain. Like, we know that's the case. Now, granted, this feeling I have that like leverages the memory perhaps has some aspect of consciousness that we haven't accounted for that is in something. So we're actually going to figure out where that, like, where would we have to look for that? That's kind of what we're doing right now. But yeah. With an abductive argument, was it? Yeah, that's what I used. I actually had not heard of abductive, but good day, sir. What is this one? Starwave. That's a nice looking emoji. And the frog is a classic. The key hubs consistently identified for this workspace are high-level cortical networks, matching our intuition that this form of self-consciousness arose with the cortex. These include areas associated with executive decision-making, attention control, and sensory integration. All right, the workspace, a recursive loop. Now, the term broadcast is quite misleading, as it might make us think of a central movie projector sending an image to passive screens. Yet this isn't how this mechanism works. We can more aptly think of this global system as a collection of many circular and recursive networks which extend across the brain. Intuitively, these recursive loops give us a sense of how consciousness is sustained. A broadcast isn't a single zap, but rather a loop sustained and amplified by subsequent ignitions, which can occur quite rapidly. So I gotta figure out if I should just make the specific wording here a little less in the weeds. These self-sustaining information integrating loops are the conscious state, and it allows us to effectively hold content in mind, report it, and deliberately act on it. We need to make this more accessible too. Okay. Yo, Peter, what's good? Welcome back. We're reading through the rough draft of the next video script. It's important to introduce a couple relevant neuroscientific concepts, transient states and neural trajectories. The conscious state isn't a static on switch. It's the entire regime of... So I got to change that. It's the... Actually, yeah, well, I feel like this is stuff that's... I think I might be redundant somewhere. I'm not sure. I might be able to cut this down. This is kind of exciting. We'll never see this coming. Oh, no. It's the entire regime of metastable recurrent activity that keeps the system poised between order and disorder. Consciousness is the trajectory. So it's according to this framework. Consciousness is the trajectory of this dynamic self-sustaining loop as it evolves from one moment to the next. We might not even need to bring up these things right here, because I think we bring up later in like more appropriate spots. Importantly, functionally speaking, each involved disparate network, whether pertaining to language, emotion, memory, etc., can both pull from the workspace and send processed information back into the workspace. Thus, the word workspace highlights this shared field of reciprocal access among specialized systems. So the question is, why do I need to say any of this? Yeah, I probably don't. Let's just get rid of that. Let's save maybe a page here. Yeah. Functionally speaking, each involved disparate network, whether pertaining to language, memory, emotion, etc., can both pull from the workspace and send processed information back into the workspace. Thus, the word workspace highlights this shared field of reciprocal access among specialized systems. This could be how to open up the paragraph, and then this would be the way that we strengthen the thesis of the paragraph. We can consider that various networks translate the shared content into its own internal code and send that processed information back into the workspace. Neuroscience research tells us that language areas produce candidate word labels, emotion systems evaluate salience or valence, memory systems retrieve associations, and motor systems prepare possible actions. Let's hammer home this coordination with an example. Think about when we scan a room. Our visual networks are active, but our semantic and linguistic systems might not be cognizantly directed. We have perception without noticeable linguistic labeling. Then we pause and reflect on what we're looking at, and the words appear in our mind. That is a pen or a chair. What just happened? The visual information of the chair was already being processed unconsciously. Our top-down attentional systems ignited that information, broadcasting it to the global workspace. I've got a to-do here, but we'll deal with that later. Our frontotemporal language and semantic hubs received that broadcast. Crucially, they then processed it and fed their own information back into the workspace. In this case, the verbal label chair. Notably, many other networks contributed to this experience, imbuing the chair with emotional and relational significance. Now, just as an added bonus, this system allows us to intuit how we can immediately transition to self-consciously understanding what we are that we are looking at the chair. I actually didn't complete this, so maybe we get rid of this. I don't know. But the idea is that these systems are recursively looking now back at the very thought that we just had of this is the chair, or this is the pen. So now we can have a thought of the self-conscious thought of I am looking at the pen. Like that, it's like this kind of back and forth. And I don't know if we keep this, but as an interesting aside, studies have found that it takes roughly 300 milliseconds after exposing someone to a novel stimulus for this entire process to complete. I should say for it to become conscious. From local sensory processing to competition to the global ignition that stabilizes into a consciously accessible pattern. We probably don't even need to talk about ignition. That's too in the weeds. We should just use broadcast, perhaps. I think we should just stay at the level of abstraction of functional. But I went into a real deep dive into the actual nitty gritty going on behind this. Yo, Peter Introvert. When we are considering all those connections, how changes in the brain influence our experience, it's already very high level of considerations with many assumptions inside. Ooh. So like, yeah, actually, out of curiosity, which types of assumptions are you thinking of? Like one of the things that we point out in the actual document is, yeah, when we do science, we bring along with us a lot of presuppositions about just things that we intuitively know. So the idea of what is happening in each of these regions, or what is you know, like what it would mean for us to have a self-conscious, like the understanding, like a self-identity, like all this stuff. Even though I don't have it in here, it's all coming to us or afforded by um, a bunch of different experiments that, like, you know, lesion studies where you do take out certain parts of the brain and you see that people have experiences where they can see the pen, they can recognize the pen, but they can't put a word to the thing. Yeah, all kinds of different studies that are really shaping like how we think about the brain, but really that are providing evidence for or providing justification for talking about these things in this way. That's really the pragmatic way of saying it. So to summarize, consciousness emerges from this mutual reinforcement among all these different systems, all translating and contributing a unique aspect of conscious experience back to the shared workspace. I don't question connections. I'm talking how we make sense of them. All right, let me try to parse this. When we are considering all those connections, how changes in the brain influence our experience, it's already very high level of considerations with many assumptions inside. I don't question connections. I don't question that the connections are there. I'm talking about how can we make sense of those connections, right? So this is kind of what we're going through right now. It's and we do get more granular, but right now we're at a very functional level of how we know that different parts of the brain are contributing different aspects of our experience to what Dewan describes as the global workspace, which is this broadcasting, which is this global network that allows all the other systems to access this information. So this is like global shared information. If we're talking about a computer programming project, this is like your global state that all your like subcomponents can talk to. I don't know if that helps for anyone here, but yeah. This is stuff that like we know from, like we already talked about lesion studies, but yeah, this is stuff we know from lesion studies. This is stuff we know from EEGs, where we can just see, like we can draw these correlations between certain types of activity and then make deductive arguments about what that means each part is doing. Yes, we are talking about the soft problem. We are not here. We are not yet, you know, like solving the hard problem right now. Do you have the feeling anyone disagrees with this whole functionality part of the script? Because a dualist would probably sign off on all of it, as far as I know. Do I have a feeling anyone disagrees? I mean, I always assume that there's people that disagree and don't disagree. There's a lot of people out there. No, like I think even with the thing that was cool with the homeostasis video, that previous video, is a lot of people did say, hey, I agree with all this stuff. It's just that you know, you're missing this other thing, or this, it doesn't actually answer the question. The stuff that we're doing right now is just getting us right. Like, this is just us starting. We're just about halfway through, but the stronger parts of the argument are coming up here, where we are actually, you know, deriving implications from this. This is just the groundwork here. Importantly, this distributed system points out that the circuits that generate linguistic representations are not necessarily the same as those that make those representations consciously accessible. Production and encoding of linguistic content and global awareness of that content can be anatomically and functionally distinct. There are multiple language systems, and they differ in how conscious they are. So actually, I got to figure out do I want to actually say all this stuff? Do I actually want to say all this? because we could probably cut this down, but this is just this is one thing that like allows us to intuit kind of how separate these different parts of the brain are. But so lexical retrieval and word form generation are often pre-conscious. Word forms can be selected before we hear them internally. Articulatory planning and inner speech motor imagery are sometimes conscious, sometimes not. And yeah, all these things are, this is like way too in the weeds, the language being used. So I gotta make this video ready. Semantic integration and comprehension can operate unconsciously in priming and automatic reading. And most crucially, metalinguistic monitoring, so hearing oneself think, is closely tied to conscious reporting. So the cool thing here, the takeaway that I'm really trying to get at is this guy is not the same guy as these guys. So the stuff that's making the words, that's taking information and making a translation of its own, supplying the word, is not the same part of the brain that is actually generating its own information for allowing us to hear ourselves think, which is, you know, how I can hear myself think like this is a pen in my mind. So yeah, that's kind of a big thing here. I mean, something like we can have all math of LLMs, but still be surprised why this actually works. Right? Yeah, I guess one of the arguments that's implicit here is that there's implications to the specific type of process that is happening under the hood, like functionally what's happening. With LLMs, we couldn't derive consciousness like that. That's going to be part of the argument, pretty much. Right. Onto the why. Yep. No, I think everyone is going to be skeptical of this why thing right now. Like, I am assuming that there are not just physicalists at this part in the video. Hopefully they haven't clicked off already. I was pretty happy about how stoked people were with the previous video, and I'd imagine they watched it all. So I need to really make a lot of this more concise and more accessible so that it reads really nicely and it's fun all the way through. But we are touching on like really, you know, somewhat complex stuff. So this helps explain our inner monologue, the I can't remember a word, but it's on the tip of my tongue feeling, and even why we can sometimes speak without thinking or use the wrong word without realizing. These are just different systems contributing to the workspace with different timings and strengths. To go full circle, this is what Damasio means by mappings of mappings. Though, as you can see, even that is an oversimplification. It's a highly complex, recursive system where all systems are constantly reading from and adding to the global workspace. So think of mappings of mappings of mappings, on and on and on. When am I recording this? I don't know. Maybe Sunday? Because I think maybe I do want to get a post onto the r/consciousness subreddit at some point, maybe Friday or Saturday. I tried getting the post of the previous video on earlier today, but I failed somehow. So I'm going to try again tomorrow. And yeah, hopefully and I'm probably going to send this out to some friends. We'll do a QA. We'll do a QA a bunch of days. I'll probably be going over this because I think this is an important video. This is a big one. I mean, you are doing the right thing. It helps with awareness how complex this process is, but I doubt science can give us what you think it can give us. Well, keep an open mind. At least give me the chance. May I see the script document, please? You may. Let me see. How do I do this? I'm probably going to be significantly working on it tomorrow morning, as I have done with every morning. But feel free to read it as we keep updating it. Now, we could wonder whether one of these downstream consumers is actually the source of consciousness. However, there isn't a single downstream network or region whose lesion uniquely abolishes consciousness across the board. That can't be a sentence that makes sense. I'll have to deal with this. This is a to-do. So we can conclude that the brain isn't a system where a signal is propagated out to different output systems akin to a movie being distributed to a screen, surround sound speakers, etc. It really seems like this network, this global network, highly correlates with conscious experience in such a way that, you know, you would describe it as like functionally causing or affecting, directly affecting, perhaps not holistically affecting, right? As we said, our conscious experience. If we ask what directly results in consciousness, the answer can't be a single neural event or location. Evidence increasingly suggests that it is the dynamic coordination of distributed neural activity, a process through which information becomes globally available and causally efficacious within this self-sustaining recursive loop. So I need to actually work on that. This is like completely not ready, but the cool thing here is that there's actually a measure for consciousness. I didn't realize this. There's a measure where it's the perturbational complexity index, where you perturb a certain area of the brain. You know, you could just create like a little pulse there, and you see how distributed and expansive the propagation is, or like the, you know, how far does that signal go. And interestingly, across many studies, awake and conscious states correlate with complex, long-lasting distributed responses. Dreamless sleep, deep anesthesia, and vegetative states correlated with low PCI. So, yeah, if you know, for someone that's in dreamless sleep or deep anesthesia, if you give that pulse, it's not going to have that effect. But if they were awake and conscious, that would have that effect. Dreaming and psychedelic states correlate with a high, if not even elevated PCI. So you would get, you would get a significant response here. So a conscious brain is resonant. A small perturbation can trigger wide differentiated reverberations across many regions, even influencing the other. Right. So I don't know how I'm going to actually go about doing this, if I even do this, but I say, to me, what's scarier than a philosophical zombie is the idea of being conscious while seemingly unconscious. With this measure, we could determine if someone with that condition is actually conscious. So, yeah, I know this is always like the freaky hypothetical of like someone isn't showing any signs of life or being conscious, but yeah, if we gave them this test, like we would be able to see if they were conscious. At least with a high degree of probability. So if we were to ask what directly results in consciousness, we'd have to look at this entire process. Currently, we can only speculate as to how each network contributes to the full broadcast. Furthermore, it's not the case that the broadcast is the display. Okay, so I have to get rid of this. This is also redundant. All right, so this is where we get to the part that I started. Like, I'm pretty stoked about everything after here, I think. So the atom of conscious experience. So we must now ask, okay, and immediately there's a mistake after I say that. We must now ask, how does this neural activity result in our intuitive subjective experience? If we want to understand how neural activity gives rise to subjective experience, we first need to understand what this activity actually is. What, if anything, could count as the atom of consciousness? At its most basic, at the most fundamental level, neural activation is the firing of many interconnected neurons, specialized cells that communicate through brief electrical impulses called action potentials. An action potential is an electrochemical event. A neuron suddenly changes its internal voltage by exchanging charged ions across its membrane, sending a rapid pulse forward, which will affect whether other neurons fire. Each pulse only lasts a millisecond or two, and in isolation, it carries no meaning beyond that single change in charge. So even though neurons are made up of molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles, activation happens at this holistic level. We can't say that all matter is conscious, nor can we say that the molecular structure of a neuron is consciousness. Consciousness isn't built from the substance of neurons. It arises from their patterns of activation, from how these tiny pulses are orchestrated across vast networks that continually excite, inhibit, and synchronize with one another. Atom in physics is useful fiction. In terms of just the abstraction, or... I mean, I'm in agreement with you in terms of like all of these all of these categories that we use, like atoms and energy and all that. Like these are conceptualizations that we came up with. This is stuff that exists in our heads. Now, once again, the concepts exist in our heads, but the concepts are in theory, something that's external to us. But I don't think that the concepts are afforded by anything that is external to us, like in some direct way, where like the thing that's external is the source of the ontology of the concepts we have in our mind. Particles like electron are distribution of potentialities. Are we talking at like a quantum level now? Or are we talking like electrical or electric potential here? Because unfortunately, I don't know too much of the physics here. But so yeah, there's a question of whether or not we can make this stuff also a little less in the weeds, but I think that was necessary to say in order to make the case that it's not like there's nothing about the matter that makes up a rock that we could say is that, like when I say could, I mean that we're allowed to say is conscious based on what we know. Same with the molecules that make up the neurons. It seems that the consciousness arises, and when I say seems, I mean we're getting this from, this is the implication, this is the direct implication from all that we've discussed previously. Specifically the measure, this measure really tells us like, hey, if the brain activity, if the communication doesn't go widely enough, then you've got no consciousness. Yes, but all physics is like that. Yeah, all physics is like that. I agree. That is true. But that doesn't stop us from respecting the logic behind the scientific method itself and what that scientific method tells us we ought to believe. Okay, what's the next part here? Each action potential on its own doesn't mean much, but when thousands or millions of neurons fire together in precise patterns, some firing slightly before others, some holding back, those patterns form the communication of the brain. That is what actually encodes the content of an image you see, or the sound of a word, or the meaning of a sentence. Now, the full story is a little more complicated. When we think about brain waves, it's easy to picture smooth ripples of electricity flowing across the brain. That's what we often see in brain scans, colorful patterns of waves that change slightly over time. But here's the tricky part. Those waves aren't the action potentials themselves, and therefore those waves don't actually carry the specific information of your thoughts or perceptions. What those scans are really showing are field potentials, the large-scale electrical fields created when thousands of neurons become slightly more or less excitable together. Think of them as fluctuations in readiness. They don't transmit a message, but they set the stage for which neurons are more likely to fire and when. In other words, those fields modulate the probability and timing of action potentials. When the local field rises, neurons in that region are more excitable, meaning they'll fire more easily and often. When it falls, they become inhibited, less likely to fire at all. This rhythmic push and pull creates coordinated windows of opportunity across the brain, moments when signals can move efficiently from one region to another. Yes, but science doesn't tell us about being. There's no theory that is confirmed. Right. That's what we're about to get to here. Science is all about fallibility. Theories are falsified, not confirmed. Yep. No, I agree. Like we're still operating in a pragmatic framework of what we should say, right? Not what is true, but what we should say is true, right? Like that this is where our foundation in Hegelian linguistics really helps us out, because we can talk about the physical world as not in some way of like this is the true thing and then we're all just responding to the true thing. It's like truth pertains most closely to our conscious experience of meaning. But once again, what we're doing here is not finding like the most fundamental truth, which is something that, shout out to Dharmadam, we can't find. What we're finding is how we ought to talk about truth in like the colloquial way of truth. Okay. So these field potentials show the overall rhythm of brain activity, the beat that keeps different parts of the brain in sync. But the content itself lives in the precise pattern of action potentials. The spikes that we don't say the spikes, so I'm gonna get rid of that. The action potentials that travel through those regions. We can think of it like an orchestra. The field potentials are the conductor's tempo and direction, determining who plays and ensuring that everyone is playing together. The action potentials are the notes, the actual music. If you remove the conductor, the orchestra becomes chaotic and falls out of rhythm. But if you remove the musicians, the music disappears completely. In the same way, when scientists block action potentials, perception and behavior vanish, even if the field potentials continue. So this is why we're talking through all this stuff. Because like these correlations are really serious when it comes to how we can think about what is actually causing consciousness, and this contributes to the broader global network theory where we're talking about information being passed. But granted, that still doesn't answer the or solve the problem here, and so we got to get to that. I mean, you are saying that consciousness arises from the brain, but that tells us nothing if we don't know from where brain. You're saying from where in the brain rises, or from where the brain arises? Because once again, like when we talk about the brain, we're dealing with a concept that comes from these physical processes. Now, you could say that we don't know where the experience thing comes from, but that's exactly what we're trying to get to here. Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't remember what the second one was. Saying that consciousness from the brain that tells us nothing if we don't know. So I'm guessing the first one was where in the brain, and the second one is where the brain itself comes from. I don't know what Brandon thinks about consciousness. Brandon really is only concerned about his theory of mind, which is specifically related to meaning and knowledge. I don't think he cares about consciousness. or at least I don't think he officially cares about consciousness. What if Brandon thinks consciousness is cringe? Yo, Jago. That would be so funny. I think that would be pretty lit. I mean, honestly, what I've learned from this past month is that consciousness is kind of cringe, or at least any like real care of actually, you know, I don't want to say this because I don't want to offend anyone. I'll just reword what I was about to say. The argument that I make by the end of this thing is that we don't need to know exactly all the answers that we have about consciousness in order to continue to do the things that we actually want to do on this channel. And that's where it's the final argument I make, where it's like, okay, I think we've done the comprehensive view that we can. Granted, we still have cool stuff to get in that view, but he actually might think the concept of trying to answer questions about consciousness are cringe. Right. Okay, that's kind of what I was gonna say, but yeah, I think that's kind of, he would point out similar to what we do, like the very concept of, you know, consciousness and the fact that there's a problem here. These are all cultural products. Like these are contingent. They're like interpretive, you know, they're just things that have infested our conscious experiences, and rightfully so. Like these are cool problems, but yeah, he would probably just point out that what happens down at the bottom here is just semantics and norms. So yeah, that's pretty difficult to get past there. All right. What do we have next here? Distributed activity. Jago, I think you came just in time. I think. It could be a little bit later, but consciousness as we experience it clearly doesn't arise from one neuron firing or even a single cluster. We don't feel individual action potentials. Rather, we must consider that our unified flow of perception, thought, and emotion occur as a consequence of these granular dynamics spread across the brain's entire distributed network, as described by the global workspace theory. Without that broader network, without information being integrated and made globally available, we don't get consciousness as we intuit it. We can only speculate whether any kind of proto-conscious experience arises at smaller scales of neural activity. Not matter, though. But even if some elementary form of awareness exists in isolated circuits, it would be nothing like our own. Our conscious experience depends on cortical systems that give it its shape. Systems that provide language, memory, and conceptual structure, and subcortical systems that supply the emotional tone and the felt sense that what we're experiencing is real. What we're experiencing is real. We tend to anthropomorphize consciousness, assuming that if something feels, it must feel the way that we do. But neuroscience strongly suggests that different brains built with different architectures likely experience the world in fundamentally different ways, if they experience it at all. I shouldn't say fundamentally, but significantly. This is where these neuroscientific frameworks become so powerful. When we consider what kind of consciousness a species might have, we can look directly at the structure of its nervous system, how distributed its communication networks are, and how much information can circulate globally. This is what leads Damasio to propose that many animals feel, even if they don't understand what they feel, experiencing emotion without reflective awareness. Of course, those feelings would be vastly different from our own, different than our own, I think. We can only, nope, I guess it's from. We can only approximate them and probably fall short in doing so. Still, from an ethical standpoint, I'd argue that it's better to err on the side of compassion, even if we can't be certain whether animals suffer in the way that we do. The cost of being wrong is far too high. So I don't know if we're keeping this, but I think it's fun, so I might just keep this in. All right, the temporal shape of consciousness. But back to neural activity. Just as we can't locate consciousness in a single neuron, we also can't find it in a single moment of time. Conscious experience takes its familiar human shape only when we zoom out and look at its evolution, the way patterns of neural activity unfold and transform over time. Earlier, we talked about how field potentials, those rhythmic waves sweeping through the brain, create patterns of excitability. They don't carry information directly, but they affect when and where neurons are most likely to fire. At any given moment, different regions of the brain fall into slightly different rhythms. Some areas are in phase with one another, meaning their excitability peaks at the same time. Others are out of sync. Their rhythms offset, or even, I should say, are offset or even opposed. This coordination determines which regions can effectively exchange information with each other. But why neuron? Why not atom with minimal consciousness? So we just made the argument earlier why neuron and not the atom. It's because when we don't have the activity of the neuron, like the actual electrochemical signals passing through. Actually, I think it would just be electric signals via electrochemical mechanisms. I don't know what the proper way of saying this. Without the actual activations, you don't get consciousness. Like we know this. We've done studies that showed that a dead person is... Well, actually, you know what? We can't say that. Dead person can't report. But like the whole idea of that PCI test, the perturbation test, where you send in that signal, you perturb a small part, and you could see where the activity goes, and then we test that with a bunch of different types of experiences. So we had the people that were sleeping, we had the people that were alive, etc. We had the people that were awake. If you were to do that, if you were to perturb a dead brain, it wouldn't go crazy. Like it would just dampen out. Like it would not do that. So that shows that you need the full activity to get the conscious state. So this is why, like, just the matter itself doesn't, like, so it's not that we know for sure that matter, that this pen isn't conscious in some sense. It's that our scientific rigor doesn't allow us to say that. Like, we're not allowed to say that a pen is conscious because there's no evidence that allows us to say that. That's the type of argument I'm making over and over again here. We're trying to figure out where we are allowed to say consciousness exists, what we are allowed to say actually affects consciousness, and what we're allowed to say causes consciousness. I didn't know Wolfram had a Twitch channel. Yeah, Wolfram's been like working on something for like 5 to 10 years of some type of theory of everything. I don't know what it is. Whenever I check in on it, it looks insane and like I don't understand what's going on. But he's working on something. Actually, I met scientific paper advocating atom having perspective. I would like to see that. That would be really cool. But yeah, I mean, I guess the way that you'd have to think about that is just electrons. Like you'd have to, I mean, it would have to be the electrons, I think, that are causing the awareness. But once again, regardless, we go back to this discussion we just had where even if some elementary form of awareness exists in a atom, it would be nothing like our own. That would be a fundamentally different awareness. It's not like, it's not the consciousness that we have. Effectively so different that we shouldn't even call it consciousness. That's the point. and it's easy to get lost in this. You're not saying GWT addresses the hard problem, are you? Well, we haven't gotten to the really fun stuff, which is the ontological implications of this. So it's like right next, I think. Okay, sometimes regions fall into a particularly stable configuration where the rhythms line up and temporarily lock together. When this happens, information can circulate smoothly between them for a brief moment before fading. We can think of this like the brain settling into a temporary groove, a coordinated state that keeps a pattern of information active just long enough to influence both of the connected networks it bridges. This is mechanistically how distinct brain systems communicate with the global workspace, by falling into sync long enough to share and stabilize what's being represented. Over time, the chemistry inside neurons, the feedback between regions, and the constant stream of new sensory input gradually push the system toward new patterns. The sequence of these changing patterns form what neuroscientists call a neural trajectory, the path that the brain's activity traces through its vast space of possible states. As these patterns shift in the global workspace, so does our experience. A new perception takes hold, a thought fades, attention moves somewhere else. That path is the stream of consciousness, a continuous unfold. So this is, we could get mad at this, but a continuous unfolding of the brain's dynamics through time. The phenomenal now, that lived sense of the present, lasts only a few hundred milliseconds before being replaced by the next. This continual changing of coordinated states is what gives consciousness its temporal and progressive shape. Our awareness emerges from the evolution of patterns, from the way one moment of coordination gives rise to the next, building on what came before. As we previously discussed, this trajectory is constantly shaped by the dialogue between specialized systems like perception, memory, language, emotion, affecting what is next represented and how it is experienced. Philosophy and religion have long pointed out that we experience the world as a story, a narrative that moves through time. Declarative memory, the kind we can recall and describe, is built as we live through experience, and as we discussed in the previous video, remembering is a retrospective. This could actually be a sentence that starts with "and." I absolutely love these. I'm a psycho that loves starting sentences with and because. And as we discussed in the previous video, remembering is a retrospective, reconstructive process. We describe this flow in words, in sequence, this thought, then that feeling, then that image. This is part of this idea, I think. However, this mechanistic exploration suggests that we can't think about consciousness as if it's a movie. It's not a sequence of low-dimensional frames, nor a computer processing step-by-step code. Its information isn't stored in binary bits, but in ever-shifting relationships, in how the timing and strength of signals evolve together, shaped by all sorts of dynamics that are far too in the weeds for this video. Instead, we can think about the brain as an analog system. In an analog system, change is continuous rather than discrete. There isn't a fixed number of possible states. There's an effectively infinite range of possibilities, just like there's an infinite set of numbers between 0 and 1. Shout out to Jago here for really making this salient for me. That being said, I might have butchered the wording here, so please let me know. Hey. A simple example of an analog system is sound. When you pluck a guitar string, it doesn't jump between preset notes. The vibration of the string can take on any frequency within a continuous range. Each possible frequency is just one of infinitely many along a smooth spectrum, which is why we need to tune the guitar. So the only stipulation here is it's effectively infinite, but really there's a finite amount of I don't know, electrons in the universe. So I think we could actually make it discrete somehow. I mean, it's once again, effectively infinite, but unless I'm, theoretically infinite as well. But yeah. All right. I think I'm late on these. So You don't have scientific evidence that we have the same consciousness. We have very strong scientific evidence that we don't have the same consciousness. Similar to how when someone has a brain lesion and can't remember anything past one day, or let's even get the crazier case, like they don't remember anything past 5 minutes from now, which I think there are some like weird scenarios where people have that type of thing. You wouldn't say that that person has the same type of conscious experience as the person next to them who can remember, you know, what happened 20 minutes ago. Like we have enough evidence to know that those are different. So you know, we're seeing these correlations in such a strong way that we're able to make really, once again, like we're not certain that the rock cannot experience anything, but the probability that, like, the pragmatic probability that we can operate with is effectively 100%. I agree that their experience is nothing like us, but we can assume spectrum with no zero states. Like our science implies zero states. I'm just saying that stopping at neuron is arbitrary. Well, we made we added reasons. Like it wasn't completely arbitrary, but those reasons might not be compelling. That's another aspect of this whole pragmatic landscape. Like reasons are compelling or they're not. And I think we're leveraging compelling reasons, but I'm curious, you're saying we can't think about it as a movie, but that is what GWT plus PCI seems to imply. That's a great point. GWT literally calls stuff broadcast and whatnot. But the point is, a movie is a sequence of frames, not a continuous stream. So like that's the whole point that we're trying to get here. I mean, effectively, when you're watching a movie, it looks like a continuous stream, but you are actually watching a discrete set of frames. But that's not what happens in our experience. Our experience isn't, you know, there aren't frames of experience. There are frames visually, right? Like, don't we know that? Don't we know that like our eyes, you know, our visual mechanisms actually do have a refresh rate. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but the experience isn't. So maybe a movie wouldn't be the right way to go about that. Yeah, that's actually something to consider. Oh man, consider a different analogy. They have to have refresh rate, otherwise we'd get too much information too quickly. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Or we would just get this constant blast of photons. I mean, maybe you would get information too quickly, but there has to be some kind of effective bit rate into the brain. There has to be a bandwidth to that, a speed, if you will. Yeah, I guess that's what effectively the brainwave frequencies are doing. Like, you know, in theory it could be quicker, but it's probably, you know, obviously gated by evolutionary development in some way. And we could also say, you know, in a different way, it's gated by other systems that, you know, require that it has to be this type of cadence or frequency. Yeah, the brain works in the same way, in the same analog way. Its activity doesn't move in stepwise jumps, but flows through a vast high-dimensional space of possible configurations. Yeah, so the point being here is, even though the brain has this underlying rate that is affected by brain waves that are happening at, you know, alpha waves, beta wave, you know, all these different waves. What's going on under the hood, what's even causing those waves is continuous. Neurons, I think it's like a sigmoidal function of when they go into those states of arousal, the states of readiness or excitability, and then they like, I don't know if it's a linear petering out, but they die out over time. But yeah, it's continuous. It's hidden every single number on the path. Faster eyesight wasn't selected for quite like other stuff. Yeah, would be cool if it was though. We'd be pretty good at League of Legends. All right. As different neural systems ignite, synchronize, and fade, the global workspace shifts its shape continuously, never quite repeating, never exactly the same. The main point here, why we took all this time to build up this explanation of neural activity. If consciousness unfolds through time, and if the underlying mechanism is fundamentally continuous, then it becomes nearly impossible to point to any single atom of experience. There is no single frame, no single spark, no single place where consciousness is. It's within this ceaseless coordinated motion of distributed neural activity that we find what we can call, or what we do call conscious experience. So that's kind of the big takeaway here. Unfortunately, it still has. Hopefully that logical argument made sense following it through. And then I've got this section, electrochemistry is above my pay grade. At this point, we've traced consciousness down to the level of coordinated neural activity, oscillations, synchrony, trajectories, and waves of excitability moving through the brain's networks. But even with all this, the mystery remains. How does the continuous coordinated activity of billions of neurons, these tiny cells exchanging charged ions and releasing chemical signals, become what we feel as experience? Is there something inherently special about the medium itself, about electrochemical signaling, that allows information to be experienced? Or is consciousness simply what happens whenever information is integrated and self-referential in highly specific ways, no matter the physical substrate? Ultimately, we now have a clearer picture of the underlying dynamics, a recursive system that integrates information about the world and about itself, shaping perception, memory, and attention into one evolving process. Yet that still leaves a significant gap between a description of what the system does and the experience of what it feels like to be that system. Hard problem time. But before assuming this is an unbridgeable gap, we need to ask what kind of gap we're really dealing with. What are the implications of a system that provides the very means with which it must describe itself? If consciousness arises from a process that is constantly modeling and remodeling itself, then perhaps the mystery we confront is itself a product of that recursion. So, ontological takeaways. Let's consider the ontological takeaways of the system we just laid out and what it might mean for how we understand consciousness. Most profoundly, our physicalist picture implies that even our experience of meaning is a product of this integrated yet distributed system. Regardless of whether the essence of consciousness, whatever that could mean, comes from neural activity or some unaccounted for ingredient, as long as it does not contradict the functional mechanisms of the brain, it does not affect the contents of our conscious experience. In other words, even if consciousness had a hidden dimension, its expression would still depend on the brain's physical organization. We often call these neural patterns correlates because we can't yet describe the full physical mechanism, but we do understand how physical mechanisms functionally cause aspects of subjective experience. When we stimulate the brain's fear circuits, we would say that the action causes the experience of fear rather than merely correlates with it. This is something we do. This is like scientists will literally stimulate a part of the brain, and the person will say, "Oh, I feel fear." How are you using the word meaning there? I'm using it in the most ontological way that we possibly could, like what things mean explicitly and acted out. Like this is theoretical in some sense, right? Like, meaning we can think of as either of these things. Like when I'm using a pen, I'm not thinking about the pen. This is the phenomenology stuff that we do actually on the document, but we don't do here. But like when I'm using a pen and I'm not thinking about a pen, like what is the meaning of the pen, right? And Heidegger will, says its meaning is like readiness to hand, he calls it, which is, effectively just ingrained motor memory, acting out habitually, so not purpose. No, this is at the fundamental level, not meaning like my life feels meaningful. This is like meaning like what anything means, like the fact that any information in your head right now, any thought you could possibly have, is affected by, is meaning. It is what I'm. Jesus Christ, I'm getting too worked up here. It is what we're referring to by meaning. All right. Not a big problem. Only water. I just jumped in my seat. I gotta chill out. I gotta stop looking into consciousness. I think I've gone crazy. All right. Thus, we can say that the meaning we experience, explicit or acted out, is functionally caused by the coordination of our memory, salience, affective, and autonomic systems. Introspection itself is a process within the workspace. Our linguistic, affective, and conceptual systems contribute to interpretations of external and internal stimuli, as well as the global workspace itself. I shouldn't say that, but as well as consciousness itself. This was the whole mappings of mapping discussion. The result is fundamentally subjective, even though, as we mentioned, our experience of the world feels certain. This reveals that what phenomenology explores is already a translated interpretive construct, a product of the very mechanisms it tries to describe. The philosopher Martin Heidegger captured this intuition by describing his own work as a hermeneutic phenomenology, so hermeneutic pertaining to interpretation, explicitly expressing the idea that phenomenology is not a neutral observation of phenomena, but an interpretive, self-reflective inquiry into the meaning of being, where interpretation and appearance are inseparable. We always already stand within interpretation. There is no view from nowhere. Halloween jump scare. Yeah, it jump scared me as well. We can say that consciousness is the source of each individual's unique ontology, the source of all meaning for them. However, we cannot say that anyone's unique experience directly pertains to some external absolute truth. We may share a similar biology, but each person's nature and nurture differs enough such that these experiences are different meaningfully. Similarly, our interpretations of consciousness today radically differs from humans from 5,000 years ago. The conceptualization of a hard problem of consciousness was afforded by a scientific culture capable of distinguishing mind from matter in the first place. So, any conceptualization we have, even about consciousness itself, is fundamentally speculative and contingent. In the same way that we don't experience the physical world directly, we similarly don't experience consciousness directly. Just as perception gives us an interpretive model of the physical world, introspection gives us an interpretive model of consciousness. This is not as strong as the sentence we just said before, but some maybe gank. And crucially, this means we cannot rely solely on intuitive, self-evident features of experience as metaphysical bedrock, even if they feel logical. Then this is like, I don't know if we should pick fights here, but theories like integrated information theory or analytic idealism, shout out Kastrup, Both begin from introspective premises about what consciousness must be, but that would be, under our argument here, that's something we ought not do. Is meaning like qualia then? I don't think I get it. Is meaning like qualia? The idea is that anything that you think that you understand about your qualia, right? Like we could say qualia is something that you don't always consciously are aware of, right? Qualia could just be things that you're unconscious of. But the idea is that anything that you can interpret, like anything that you can be cognizant of, any meaning that you think about regarding consciousness or not consciousness. Who came up with this qualia idea? Anything you can cognizantly sense, like anything that you can. I mean, really, meaning involves conscious and unconscious. Like I'm using it in a broad way, but yeah, the point I'm trying to make here is specifically regarding explicit meaning, like how we're conceptualizing these things. When I say that I know what consciousness feels like, that's just something that's afforded to me by the emotion centers in my brain that are making me feel like that type of statement or that type of assertion about my own understanding is right. Anything that I think I notice in consciousness is being afforded by these mechanisms. Like it's being afforded by my memory about what things are, my expectation, etc. Like there's a cool example of this is like when you go to meditate, and let's just say it's a guided meditation, and they say thoughts are going to appear, they're going to arise in your consciousness, and then they're going to fade away. Like that's setting expectation for you. Like that's now affecting your internal system, your memory, your context, etc. So that when you do pay attention to consciousness, now what you notice are thoughts. Like you can only see it's not you can only, but you're going to be primed to see what you're seeing in those ways. Speculative and contingent, at including that statement. Right. Exactly. Peter, you're on to something, because that's where we're heading right here. We could just skip it. Ultimately, our frameworks must remain accountable. Do I make a transition here? So IIT, to its credit, has a scientific research program. It grounds itself in measurable quantities and testable predictions about the integration of information. Yet its central claim that integrated information is consciousness. Okay, so you know what? I should probably get rid of this. But ultimately, our frameworks must remain accountable to evidence and predictive success, even if they are, in the end, interpretive constructions. The scientific picture of consciousness may still be incomplete, but its strength lies in being corrigible, empirical, and open to revision rather than resting on what merely feels self-evident. If someone wanted to prove that the physicalist framework is wrong, they'd have to do it through the same empirical pathways that physicalism itself relies on. Unless, of course, they've decided to give up on scientific rigor altogether. Like, that's the whole point. Yeah, the frameworks that we might even get to this again. Do I get to this again? Yeah, the frameworks that we leverage here, like global workspace theory, are just concepts that I have in my mind, and I'm trying to communicate it in such a way where it makes sense in your mind. So they are fundamentally contingent and speculative, right? Like they're just these are just statements, but these concepts that we're using are like constituted by the evidence. Like we have to we leverage our understanding of what evidence means and understand and leverage our understanding that these frameworks have the evidence, and not like it becomes like a very odd equation. That it becomes a very pragmatic equation rather than just a equation about what is true and what isn't true. But I could make that more clear, though. I will probably work on the framing of all these things. Physicalism has already overthrown itself, has already overthrown himself. Right. You know what? I think this is like, that's kind of true in some sense. I think a language model, was it yesterday or the day before, told me that my own system is actually not physicalist because I don't purport like the physical world to be the ontological source of truth. Like we have this ability to conceptualize that the physical world is what actually leads to consciousness, which is the ontological source. Like that is where meaning comes from. It's the mapping. It's this mapping of mappings, and it allows us to hold the very thought that the physical world is like. It's this really weird like loop, but yeah, that's kind of the beauty of what's going on here. We kind of get to have our cake and eat it too. We get to be physicalist and idealist at the same time. But the LLM told us that we weren't idealist either. That's the funny part. I'm gonna send this video to Castro with the attachment of a badly drawn. You are tweaking. I don't want Castro to be on my bad side. I want, or I don't want to be on Castro's bad side. Is that the wording? Yeah, I don't want to create beefs in the field here, even just for clout. All right. All right. So we got this next section, figuring this shit out, which I'm probably going to change before we post on Substack. Solving the hard problem with science is deeply unintuitive, but that's the point. Science explains why it's difficult to intuit how consciousness arises, because it shows how our intuitions themselves are products of the system we're trying to explain. Let's bring this back to our two pragmatic paths. For filling the gap, we need to better conceptualize our underlying neural processes at both a biological and functional level. For dissolving the gap, the idea is that we can break the hard problem into many tractable, easy problems, tracking how specific contents become conscious, determining which aspects of consciousness are necessary for feel versus report, continuing with lesion and perturbation studies, etc. For example, neuroscientist Anil Seth, who advocates a predictive processing view of consciousness, argues that by fully solving what he calls the real problem, explaining all the phenomenological properties of experience, such as why the experience of red feels different from jealousy or the taste of cheese, the hard problem will dissolve, much like the hard problem of life dissolved once we understood molecular biology. In practice, these two paths converge. Dissolving the gap empirically often means filling it conceptually, refining how we map experience to mechanism until the mystery loses its force. Proponents of dissolving the gap essentially argue that we can effectively fill the gap by comparing the properties of various experiences to identify which abstractions are most relevant to our intuitions about consciousness. In each case, we're looking for a conceptual solution. We are looking for the abstractions that make the relationship between mechanism and experience no longer feel mysterious. That is partly what I attempted to do with this video. So that's like the idea. Like, imagine that the hard problem isn't some real thing. Like, imagine that the meaning. Let's. How do I want to say this? Imagine that half of the story of you right now thinking about the hard problem is what you believe to be semantically true, and I'm trying to tell you that half of the hard problem is actually the feeling of certainty that you feel when you think that the hard problem is true. Like, when you think about the hard problem, parts of your brain are actually making you have that feeling that the hard problem is something that's true and not actually affected yet. And so what we're really looking for is abstractions that make it so that when you think about the hard problem, you think, oh, it's fixed, or it doesn't matter anymore. Like, the question is, how do we get from an experience, from this experience to this experience? It's not about actually, like, it's not as if the hard problem is some external thing that we are filling in the gap for. It's the experience of us thinking about the hard problem now. This is actually stuff I should have in the book, in this script. We need to expound on this. We need to expound on this, like I did on stream. That's you know, this is a lot of the stuff that we talk about with the document as well. I'm gonna he won't. It's so I can get him to debate me, then start loudly eating a chocolate bar. How can you loudly eat a chocolate bar with a actually, I guess if it's got nuts in it, maybe with a particularly scrunchy wrap. Okay, there you go. While saying every time he tries to speak. I'm stuck on this meaning thing. Is experience of meaning and experience of experience the same thing? Sure. Yeah. Well, when I say experience of meaning, like this is a conceptualization. I'm putting a lens onto what I'm trying to put a lens onto qualia. But the reason why I'm privileging meaning here is because anything that we can think about, like any true statement we can think about, right? Like imagine that you think in facts. Like that's what I'm referring to. I'm trying to highlight the fact that the facts that we think about, the things that we feel like we notice factually, are afforded by these very underlying processes. So yeah, what you think is experience, and with certainty, so you know, perhaps rightfully so, like what you feel like is true. So like what we said, what we should also make more clear somewhere is like the presupposition, like having a premise, a metaphysical premise of a framework of consciousness that starts with what Kastrup starts with, analytical idealism. He starts with the only thing that we know to be true is consciousness. I would argue that you're already operating within some interpretive lens. Like you have this feeling that you do understand consciousness, or you understand that consciousness is true unlike other things, but this meaning that you're feeling right now with this feeling of certainty is similarly affected by the brain, just like the feeling of certainty that we get when we say, oh, this is a pen that I'm holding right now. So we can't start with our contingent. We can't start with our contingent intuitive premises. Now, granted, obviously, like science always starts with intuitive premises like that, but you know, that's not quite the point that we're trying to make. Wittgenstein must be consulted for the sake of Daniel. Yeah, we got to get Wittgenstein in here. I mean, a lot of this stuff is very much highly influenced by Brandom and Heidegger and just, you know, these thinkers. This is kind of crazy stuff. I'm not feeling meaning though. I don't know what that means. All right, we gotta bring it out. We gotta go back to our long lost child. I am not idealist, but idealism is a second best option. I thought we were idealist. Like technically, we're following like conceptual idealism, but it's not quite the same. I think the language model told me it wasn't. But there was some nuance about the way that that I'm talking about this that makes it not the same. All right, here we go. Experience in the moment. Oh, here we go. This is what we're getting at. Meaning as our primary focus, our exploration has led us to a fundamental problem of knowledge. That is a problem of epistemology. Part 1 of this framework is tasked with answering the question, what can we know about the world and our place in it? We can begin to answer this question by acknowledging a simple mindful observation. All knowledge, everything we perceive, feel, and understand, arises through the medium of consciousness. Crucially, while consciousness itself may feel like a flood of raw information, anything we can consciously notice, anything that becomes a distinct perception or thought, is not random noise. It is intelligible. When we see a chair, we don't merely perceive a shape or a function. We encounter what it means. We recognize it as a chair, as something to sit on, or perhaps even something associated with a particular memory or space. This meaning is not primarily a quality of the physical matter itself, but is something that arises within the conscious experience of perceiving it. If consciousness is our only access to knowledge, and if the nature of our conscious attention is inherently meaningful, then a promising epistemological path emerges. To investigate the world, we can first investigate the nature of our experience of meaning itself. And this might even be a must. I know I've switched it from a must to a can, but I might want to switch it back. This shift in focus leads us from a general question about knowledge to a more precise one about our experience. Instead of asking what something means, we can ask, what is it like for something to be experienced as meaningful? We are not only concerned with what a chair is, but with how we meaningfully experience it as a chair. So this sets us up for meaning in the document here. Because what we ultimately deal with experience patterns. Right. Yeah, I agree. That said, we can have like a science of our experience. Like this is where phenomenology comes through pretty nicely, and we could start to conceptualize the things that we experience, and we can consider what it might imply about other things. And that led us to the rigor of the physical world, or of science itself, etc. Like this is we could read a lot of part 1 right now. that gives you the full story of what I usually harp on, but we will never be above it. I agree. We will never be above it. All right, the experience of meaning. This will be a fun detour. Just as we used mindfulness to develop our intuition about the nature of consciousness, we can apply the same approach to explore our experience of meaning. By observing how meaning arises, resonates, transforms, and fades in moment-to-moment experience, we can develop a more nuanced, dynamic understanding of meaning, one that does not reduce it to a fixed or external property. In doing so, we aim to contribute to our more comprehensive metaphysical understanding of the world, one that fully embraces our subjective experience as an integral part of reality. So the document is like already right off the bat, we're talking the ontology of like the consciousness being the source of our ontology. Stan writing like Heidegger. I don't even know if that's true. I don't even know how Heidegger writes, right? Like I read him through a translator. What's next? He's gonna say the experience of experience. Are you looking ahead? This is all Heidegger stuff, actually. This is, yeah, look at this. Okay, when we pause to reflect on our experience, we notice that meaning is not something we construct after the fact. It is already there, shaping how the world appears to us. This leads us to our Martin Heidegger thing. The phenomenological path taken here is significantly influenced by Heidegger's being in time, while we set aside the book's complex metaphysical system. Its descriptive account of the structure of everyday experience is foundational to our exploration. Heidegger's central insight is that we primarily exist as beings who are engaged in the world, not as detached minds observing it. We are not subjects looking at a world of objects. We are fundamentally in the world, caught up in a web of relationships, projects, concerns. This perspective directly informs our exploration of engagement and concern. Okay, so let's get back before we spoil what's coming ahead here. So meaning is real. It depends what you mean by real. Like we can only conceptualize what we mean by saying the words meaning is real. That's the pragmatic part of this. What does it mean to exist in reality? Right? You have to get more precise if you want to not be ambiguous. Because really what we're doing is we're saying things, and then other people like, you know, I'm saying something and you're inferring something from what I'm saying, and then you're typing something back and I'm inferring something from what you're saying. So when I say something that many different people can infer different things from, you know, I would say that I'm being ambiguous. And so I'm arguing that like our notion of what reality is quite ambiguous. That's why we have to get down to the nitty-gritty in all these cases to explain what we're trying to say. Your positions can be probably in most aspects be described as new materialism. Yeah, can we find that? Let's find the Gemini discussion that actually did put a. Where is this? Pragmatic naturalism. Okay. Oh, this is where we got to the 5-year-old thing? Okay, this is great. Oh, this is, yeah. How would you describe the framework expressed in this video? Can I even call it physicalist, since it's seemingly also conceptual idealist? Is there another word for it? Is this framework novel, so there wouldn't be an apt colloquial philosophical term for it? And it says, the most accurate term for your framework is pragmatic naturalism or methodological physicalism. The framework's method is strictly naturalist and physicalist. You state that the standards and rigor of empirical science are the only tools being used. It's not really the only tool. We're using some intuition here. You derive the high plausibility of physicalism from abductive reasoning based on all existing scientific evidence. And then pragmatic methodological. You explicitly state you are not arguing arguing for what is true in some absolute ontological sense. Instead, you're arguing for what is the most plausible, promising, useful, and communicable pursuit, which is, I also argue in many cases, just not in the script, that this is the only thing we can do. Like, this is the pragmatic look at semantics itself. This makes your stance a pragmatic or methodological one, not a dogmatic metaphysical one. You're betting on the horse that has the best track record, science. Okay, physicalism versus conceptual idealism. You are not expressing a contradiction. Your framework uses methodological physicalism to explain the phenomena that conceptual idealists and panpsychists find important. Here's the key move you make in the script. You are treating conceptual idealist style experience as a product of a physicalist process. In your framework, the physicalist base, the brain operates according to neuroscientific principles. The idealist phenomenon, this physical system generates an interpretive model of consciousness. You cite Heidegger's hermeneutic phenomenology, stating that we always already stand within interpretation. The synthesis, the crucial link is that this interpretation is not a fundamental feature of the universe, as a true idealist might argue. Instead, it is a function of the brain's physical mechanisms. You state this directly. Phenomenology is already a translated interpretive construct, a product of the very mechanisms it tries to describe. So no, you cannot call it a conceptual idealist framework. You are a methodological physicalist who is taking the problems of idealism seriously, the nature of interpretation, meaning, and subjective experience, and then explaining them using neuroscience. So, yeah. So, yeah, what we're doing that's particularly novel is synthesizing these together. You're blending the hard-nosed empirical approach of GWT and Damasio with the deep philosophical humility of the hermeneutic tradition. You're using Heidegger to explain why the gap feels so real, while using Dewan and Damasio to explain the mechanisms that create that feeling. So there isn't a single colloquial term for it because it's a specific, well-researched synthesis of multiple academic fields. And then we had it... Okay, let's shift topics for a second. Can you describe the framework explained in this script to a 5-year-old? So I think we should do it to like a 10-year-old next. And then maybe a 15-year-old. But we aren't done, actually. I think we should go back to the script. We could go through a whole phenomenology of meaning right now, but I think we got to just go back to the script, if that's all right. Real means, okay, so if I discover a new object no one has ever discovered before, it has meaning, but the meaning just isn't clear to anyone yet. Uh, this is a good example where we can really hammer home what we're trying to say. What we're pointing out is that meaning isn't something that is on objects, that is external. Meaning is something that arises in your experience. So it doesn't matter if this object hasn't been seen by anyone before, but meaning is what happens to you when you see that object. And so we could say that no one has had meaning related to that object before. Maybe it depends what that object is, because we can talk about the relational aspect of concepts that we think about, right? Like perhaps there's a specific pen that no one's ever seen before, but everyone knows what a pen is. So the question is like, what is, how much of the meaning of a pen or of an individual pen is the meaning that's pertaining to the category of pen? So that's why meaning is also quite ambiguous, but it does capture like a very clear thing. And it has meaning before we assign it any. Right? Like meaning isn't something that we assign. Meaning is something that appears to us or happens to us or is disclosed to us. Like Heidegger describes being, capital B being, as disclosed, which is kind of insane, honestly. But it's the same idea as thoughts arising. Like from where? Where are thoughts arising from in our conscious experience? Like meaning just appears to us. It just happens, it'd be crazy if we asked Lay LLM. Oh, I see. Hello, how do I explain this to Annika Harris? That would be, what we should do. How would Annika Harris think about this? Annika Harris's argument is actually like, it's a pragmatic argument. It's like a decent pragmatic argument. I don't know if it like, I don't even know how to like attack it other than just like, I'm not interested. But like her argument is that, hey, perhaps the reason why we haven't found enough stuff that satisfies this question, the hard problem question, is that we've been starting with a physicalist presupposition, and then we've been directing our science in that way. And her hypothesis or her thought is, hey, what if we actually start with panpsychism and like let's just presuppose panpsychism, not say that it's true, like we don't know that it's true yet, but like let's just say we presuppose that it's true. What types of hypotheses would we have related to science? So Annika Harris is science directed. Like she's actually focused towards like what science should we do that starts with the idea of panpsychism rather than the regular physicalist presuppositions. And I think the only argument you could have is like, why though? Like, is that even a good argument to say that just because the physicalist presuppositions hasn't satisfied, we have been getting developments, which we are going to get to in this script, but it hasn't satisfied you, therefore we ought to, break what would usually be scientific rules or norms, at least. That's what Heidegger claims, as far as I know, that the object already is meaningful. If that's not what you think, I'm unsure why all the Heidegger stuff. Heidegger, I don't think, believes that objects are... When Heidegger is pointing out that objects are already meaningful, he's referring to the idea that, like, once the object gets into your mind, into your conscious mind, it's already meaningful. So, like, when I see the pen feels like it's already meaningful. Like, this is a phenomenology that Heidegger's doing. He's not giving you an ontology that's separate from phenomenology. This is a existential phenomenology where he's pointing out that, my experience of this pen is one where the meaning is already there. Like he's pointing out aspects of our experience as it relates to being. I also think neuroscience is very opposed to Heidegger's ideas, but that might be for another time. I think so. I think neuroscience would be opposed to the very ideas that I've been saying. But that's, you know, I don't know if they have arguments specifically against the arguments I'm making. This problem is actually so easy to solve. That should just be our... The video should be called "The Hard Problem is Easy." Like, that's really what we should call it. But unfortunately, that's not the direction we take throughout the videos. So even though I think that would hit well, I don't think we should do that. I think he is pointing to ontology. I think I need to dig into that. I definitely could be wrong. No, I mean, you know, I don't want to be, I don't want to use any logical fallacies here, but I mean, I've read that book. I've read Being in Time multiple times. I'm at this point, I'm quite confident I know what Heidegger is getting across within that book. Yeah, I guess that's all I could say there. But yeah, if we had the time, I would read through the document, which we go through like a good phenomenology exercise where we notice aspects of experience as they happen. Like we point out what it means for, you know, for meaning to already be there. Yeah, you know what? The crucial thing, if you're going to look into this, the crucial thing to point out is that when Heidegger's talking about meaning already being there, like or being already there, right? Already being in the world, he's talking about capital B being, and capital B being is highly associated with consciousness. You could think it's like experience, capital B being experience. Now lowercase b being is that's closer to like what I describe as explicit meaning, like when we put something into words, like when we capture something into possibilities, like concrete possibilities. Like now we're dealing with lowercase b being. So, you know, even though like the discussion of lowercase b being makes it easy to think that an object might have being, like an object might be something concrete and absolute and it doesn't change, but yeah, really, even in that sense, Heidegger is talking about our experience of the object in our experience. But capital B being talks about, you know, that's talking about the whole state of consciousness, the whole experience. Qualia is capital B being, or it's a, you know, it's associated. Oh no, I hate words. Imagine what that pen is thinking every time you pick it up. It's a great point. The pen loves me. Don't you understand? Whenever I'm doing this, I'm hugging the pen with my fingers. Have you ever considered that? Can you put googly eyes on your on your pen, please, for scientific purposes? Are there googly eyes that small? If it could talk, would it? We wouldn't understand it. Right. No, I mean that is, yeah. I mean that's the thing we were saying earlier with if this pen was conscious, it would not be what we think consciousness is. Like it wouldn't be what I think that the feeling of consciousness is. It wouldn't be something that I could even put into words of any kind. And at that point, is it like the same thing as what we mean by conscious? That's another argument I should make, honestly. Oh my gosh. But that, unfortunately, we make that argument, I don't know, somewhere else. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to transcribe this stream, and I'm going to ask Gemini, can you recall every single time I say I need to do this to the doc or to the script? That's literally Wittgenstein. Nice. Oh, does he say that about consciousness? Because I mean that's one of the arguments we could take here. It's but the cool thing that we're doing that Wittgenstein didn't do is that we are getting to these final like ontological arguments from the neuroscience. Like that's the whole circle that we've made here. I have not seen The Art in a while. I do have to check it out. I don't know if I still have the link because I'm not. Oh, you know what? It's on Instagram, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, I just never go on Instagram because I don't go on Instagram with. Actually, I don't have a personal Instagram, so I only have the Stan Richson official Instagram, and yeah. That's probably for the best. Yeah, I've been off the grid since high school, I think. I've been off the grid for 10 years. If a lion could talk, we would not understand him. Is that what Wittgenstein says? Because we're going to end up being able to understand a lion, I think, through our lifetime. I think using AI, we're going to be able to learn languages that we would otherwise never be able to learn. And you know what? Didn't I talk about this on stream? Like, not only are we going to be not only are we going to learn a lion's language, but I think we're going to be able to like have a screen up. Like, imagine a pen of young lions, and then we have a screen up, and we show it other lions. I think we can socialize the lions that are in the pen with lions that we put on the screen. Now, imagine that the lions that are on the screen are AI lions. And not only did we take, actual lion data from that, but then we altered it in such a way where we are now communicating specific things. Like, I think we could actually affect lion culture by doing that. I deleted Facebook like 6 months ago. Congratulations. Grok, translate this to lion, please. Baudrillard? Baudrillard? All right, we got to get through this. We are 2 pages away. In practice, okay. In each case, we're looking for a conceptual solution. We need to expound on this like I did on stream. Okay, I hope I remember what that means tomorrow. Rather than treating various physicalist frameworks as competitors, it makes more pragmatic sense to view them as complementary lenses on the same underlying process. Homeostasis, global workspace theory, predictive processing, active inference, and free energy principle each highlight a different functional aspect of the same underlying system. Oh, do I say underlying system twice? Oh, underlying process. Underlying system. We'll have to figure that one out. Consciousness is an evolved emergent property of recursive self-organizing dynamics. None of these require a further bridge between matter and mind. The structure of the process already entails the structure of experience, recursive modeling of the world and the self, unfolding through continuous feedback. This isn't speculative metaphysics. It's the natural trajectory of empirical work when its implications are taken seriously. Pragmatically, this approach reframes the hard problem as something to revisit over time, but not something to get stuck on. Bam. Okay, it's okay to not know more than we currently do. And this is where I actually think I am going to use the Hank Green video quotes. I think just 2 of them. Just to be clear, the physicalist view is predicated on the assumption that its own perspective is insufficient and lacking. The claim that neuroscience will never solve the problem is an untestable, unfalsifiable statement of metaphysical pessimism. Science operates on the explicit bet against such never claims. Unless, of course, we had proof that we could never do it, like we had scientific proof. You want to know what my meditation teacher is saying about the self? Yeah, sure. I do. I do want to start my mindfulness journey once again. As with anything else, consciousness, reality, being, self, neither extreme of existence or non-existence or any combination of these applies. Okay, let me try to parse this. As with anything else, neither extreme of existence or non-existence or any combination of these applies. I might need some translation here. But yeah, there are 4 extreme views about self, all of which are rejected in the Mahayana, that there is a self, that there is no self, that there neither is a self nor is not a self, that there both is a self and no self. So they reject all 4, right? Every time I hear mindfulness or mindfulness journey, I think of this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Right? The synthesis of self and no self is that there neither is a self nor or is there no self. Peter, I'm going to sleep. Thanks for the stream. Enjoy the sleep. Thank you for the discussion. Thanks for giving me the chance. Thanks for the pushback. This stuff does help because I'm going to be reading through this thing and I'm going to be trying to make this even clearer and more effective. So I appreciate it greatly. And Tom is your meditation teacher, Hegel. Yeah, so the pragmatic side of what you're saying here, Dom, is that like we ought not think about the self as there being a self, or we ought not think about the self as there being no self. In some sense, this is paradoxical because, perhaps the idea is that we just ought not think about self entirely. we should try to not, even entertain a thought about what the self is or isn't. He was saying the concepts are categorically different to phenomena and they don't touch. So trying to apply concepts to it don't really apply. Right? This is the difference between capital B being and lowercase b being. The lowercase b being isn't the full picture of capital B being. Right, but the problem is most of us feel like we have a self. Yeah, I mean, it's not always problematic. It does lead to problematic things, I would argue, but I do think, like, the thing that we do in part 1 of this the document is we leverage a certain identity of ourself. Like we strategically leverage the identity that we have freedom, that we can do things. But like we obviously have a nuanced take on that. Like we build that up, but Heidegger's capital B being is not culture. Culture, what connects to culture most clearly for Heidegger is being with others and the they self, or das Man. Like there's this idea of, like there's this aspect of our experience that feels like other people understand what we understand. Like when I see this and I think this is a pen, it's like, not only do I think this is a pen, I think other people think it's a pen. There's like this social aspect of our experience. And that's what he's trying to capture there. So it's not actually the external culture that he's trying to capture. It's the culture as it's been internalized by me. I wish. Heidegger certainly participated in culture already. You could say that again. Okay. Science is actually moving incredibly quickly in this field, and many researchers are focused on answering these very questions. They are mapping how patterns of brain activity correspond to patterns of experience with unprecedented precision. Studies in representational geometry show that when we see colors, faces, or hear sounds, the brain's activity forms distinctive geometric shapes in high-dimensional space, structures that mirror how those experiences feel. Causal experiments using stimulation techniques like TSM. I don't know what TSM is. We might have to figure that one out again. Can nudge those neural patterns and sometimes shift perception itself, further hinting at direct links between mechanism and experience. Predictive modeling is offering new ways to simulate how the brain's expectations shape perception, while network analyses are revealing how different states like dreaming, anesthesia, or psychedelics each have their own dynamic signatures. Even interoceptive research is connecting the rhythms of the body, heartbeat, breath, and internal chemistry to the feeling of presence itself. Consciousness research is becoming a deeply interdisciplinary science, part neuroscience, part physics, part computation. It's less about finding a single answer and more about tracing the intricate patterns that make experience possible. We can only expect that the coming developments will continue to blur the. So this is the real deal statement here. We can only expect that the coming developments will continue to blur the line between what once felt unimaginable and what we can finally describe. So I'm talking about the hard problem here, right? It feels unimaginable for us to close the problem. We only expect that the coming developments will continue to blur the line between what once felt unimaginable and what we can finally describe, shifting the very boundary of the mystery itself and redefining what remains to be explained. So this isn't to say that we're not going to have a hard problem, once we solve parts of the hard problem, right? Like, you could argue that the hard problem is something you can never solve because the hard problem is going to change shape. Like what it means for, us to feel or something like that, and the difference. So what's the thumbnail going to be? That's a good question. I mean, so far I've kind of kept with making the thumbnail text to be as provocative or provocative within the bounds of what is actually in the video as possible. So, I mean, it's probably going to be the same thing. Make the soy face. I should start getting into like, what would I say, staged faces. Like I've really just taken a face still from the video and put that into the thumbnail. But so I'm gonna follow the same thing I've been doing. It's probably gonna be like this is a ridiculous one. It's probably gonna be something similar to these. And it'll be. It's the question is, what are the words going to be? Like this is effectively my branding. Granted, you know what? We could do this better. I think. I don't think this square is actually nice. I think we should have a gradient, a full screen gradient that slowly transitions into transparent. I think that's the ticket. A white on this side with the same branding, and then a picture on the other side. Or in this case, it would be, I mean, in this case, I don't know if anyone appreciated this. This I thought was pretty sick. Check out the gradient here. So what I did is I you can actually kind of see it right here. There's a box. There's a box or a square that is just a gradient from this color to this color. That's right here. It's just the top here. And then I tried to do the same thing with his jacket color and my shirt color. Doesn't look as nice. The top one looks much nicer. But it almost looks like we're in the same space because of it. And it also looks like we're wearing a really large shirt. That allows it's like in Old Greg, the three guys in the same sweater. I have an idea. Edit your face and make it insanely Giga Chad. Sharpen the chin, jawbone. Right, the union of the greatest philosophers of 21st century. It would be sick if you just wore whatever the other person in the video is wearing. That would actually be really crazy. I just find it and then I wear it, and then I should have just made this black as well, and then I probably should have just set it up so that it looked like I was looking at him. Chances are people would say I'm using AI though. And also I would probably have to use AI in order to get that. But that is a great bit. Onion Helmet, is this a video idea? The union of the greatest philosophers of 21st century? So unfortunately, I think that video would require a lot of research, and I am. Oh, you guys merged. Oh, you're saying that Alex O'Connor and I are the greatest philosophers. Thank you. All right, so we've got one last section here, which is like this needed to be set. Like this video is operating as something that we can just do and never have to deal with again. Honestly, we don't have to deal with consciousness ever again. That's not true, but like chances are something's going to come out, maybe change the story. But this story I think lasts for a while. Before we close out, I want to make one last pragmatic argument, especially as it relates to this channel. While it's nice to seek closure on the mysteries of consciousness, we do have a sufficient understanding on the matter to continue with the central topics of this channel, achieving a sense of freedom, leveraging that agency to identify and pursue our goals, and ultimately to pursue a meaningful and rewarding life. Meaningful in this way is different, a different use than meaning, as we've been talking about it all night. We have the capacity to deliberately direct our own attention, afforded by our own culturally contingent self-understanding, an understanding that we can reflect on at any moment. And this deliberate reflection affects our neural activity, physiology, behavior, and perhaps most importantly, our future understanding. By knowingly engaging in, so I should say experience and understanding. By knowingly engaging in this reflective practice, we can gain a feeling of freedom within our lives. This is part one. This one sentence is part one here. If this is something you find interesting, we'll be discussing it soon on this channel, so make sure to subscribe. Outro. Admittedly, I'm now burnt out on consciousness. As I mentioned, it isn't necessary that we solve these problems in order to pursue this channel's ultimate aims. That said, perhaps it was necessary to build the argument for why that is the case. Since I expect many people to identify and challenge this channel's physicalist presuppositions, especially since we do so in a unique, seemingly idealist way. Regardless, I felt like this was an apt rite of passage for this channel, given that consciousness is so fundamental. We will make sure to cover more practical topics in the future, so stay tuned. I hope you all enjoyed and perhaps learned something. Have a nice rest of the day. And that's the video. So we just need we need to make it slightly more expedited, I think, and a little more accessible, and maybe yeah, I got to follow all the tips and tricks we've talked about today and all the things to look out for. Are you using that Pixels thumbnail generator, or what's it called? The one that generates thumbnails based on most click trends. I'm not. Is that what Onion Helmet, is that what you're using? What is going on here? Is this a cat thinking? This is good stuff, honestly. What is consciousness? And it's a cat thinking. If I just put myself on the right. I think text goes farther than image. I think it goes, like, in my mind, the priority is text, bolded text, and then a face. And that, I mean, obviously that's what is leading me to my thumbnails right now. It's like this is the only thing that I think really needs to be on the thumbnail. I don't think we ever, like, what is happening here? This doesn't help me out at all. I mean, I guess, you know what? This allows him to say something in the title that, I mean, I guess the text helps me, but that's really it. But I don't think he needs the images of the people here. I think he could literally have bolded words, non-Christian versus Christian, without the arrows. I don't think the arrows and the people in here are helping much. I think this face is helping. This face is great. But yeah, this is how I'm thinking about it. So this is why it's very simplistic. But yeah, I think we could get away with moving this a little bit to the left, maybe getting that gradient here, maybe getting the face bigger. I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. What do we got? More comments? Oh, Kashmir Shivaism? Kashmir Shivaism? Is a monistic and non-dualistic philosophical and religious tradition. Oh, this is a tradition. I thought this was a person that worships Shiva as the supreme reality, the sole source of all existence. Is this in the... not there. Is this in the Consciousness Atlas? No. Would it just fall under... what, it said it's a monistic? Nah. It did not. This cat solved consciousness. This cool cat. I think Alex might be using that app, to be honest. Wait, did you add those caption pop-ups at things at the end of the video? Did I add those caption pop-ups at the end of the video? Are you talking about me and my video? So people might click that video with the cap. Okay, are you asking about this video?
Just function.
Oh my gosh. Are you talking about these bad boys? Oh, not those bad boys.
Video.
These.
Have a great rest of the day.
You're talking about these bad boys? No way, it's gonna give me a stream. I gotta get rid of this. We gotta do actual. I didn't realize it could do streams. I don't want to give anyone a stream. Oh, geez. Yes. So I will have to use one for this video during the next video as I talk about this video. I'll make sure I do that. Well, so this one is on. Pick the one that is most likely to help. Like, this is the right one here is what's most likely to get the views, I guess. And then this one. So I don't know why it's showing me this, honestly. But this one is for everyone. It's the welcome. Just because I expected that people would be new to the channel, so I wanted them to be funneled in. But I'm not sure what's showing up for people on this right side. Since you said the videos going through the document is... Oh, since you said the video going through the document is probably the most important, there's got to be a way to direct them to... Oh, you're saying since the... So, yeah, I mean, I guess the direction would be they go to the welcome and then... I mean, ideally, it would just be they check it out. Yeah, I guess we don't really say anything other than in the title. But the nice thing is that every single reading one comes with, like, it's already within the playlist. So I don't know why it's not giving me a playlist view right now. That's unfortunate. But yeah, in theory, people would be able to find the playlist. They would go to hello. This is where you could see the read-throughs, how you experience the world. So Daniel End, if you're still here, this is the video where I walk through what I was about to just read today. The major section on experience in the moment. Which goes through meaning, and then it goes through actually a lot of science pertaining to our experience of meaning in the moment. at a different. It's not at a low level of consciousness, but at the level of all the things that are affecting our experience in the moment. Can you see the average watch times? I'm sure I can. So, this is probably not that interesting. We're probably looking for this one. This I'm kind of okay. Did we ever get this restriction? It's still in dispute. Yeah. Thank goodness I did cut this one. And then I got a new. I switched out a song. Unfortunately, I really like the song in this one, but I'm checking if the copyright person's gonna ever get back to me on this, because maybe I could use that song in another video, but I think it's too much of a risk. Yeah, what are we looking for? We're looking for analytics here. Average watch times. That's not average watch time. It's kind of, I think it's kind of low. Yeah, like average view duration gets brought down by like small views. Like I want to know maybe the distribution of watch times. Is this it? No, this is over days. Like I'm curious if like how many people are actually watching all of it. That's really what I care about, not the average view duration. Oh man, it's gone up. Maybe that's because the people who are watching it now must be pretty interested. I don't know. Average percentage viewed. So what does this mean? Average percentage viewed. So how long do you have to stay to be a view? Look at this. This is the drop off. So we lose a lot of people right off the This is the problem with, so the videos that I'm making right now are for people that are genuinely interested in this stuff, probably, such that like I do expect drop-offs. There's a lot of stuff we cover, and sometimes we don't get to the really crazy stuff. Like my response to panpsychism starts here. That's crazy. But this is a video that now can just like kind of exist as a, you know, they see that's it. Yeah. Immediately like, oh, like they're pretty fine with the beginning of this. You know, when it, you know, when Alex O'Connor's attractive face is on screen, and then immediately hits me, boom, gone. And I don't blame him, because this.
I mean, I think the most plausible account of consciousness.
I think that's so great. It's just like Hot Ones. 69% of viewers still watching at around the 30 mark, which is typical. Learn by comparing to your other videos. Whoa. Can we? Oh, we can't do all videos because it's going to start bringing in these streams. Like no one's watching these streams. Except for, you know, anyone who's come in the past few days doing that. I'm glad that we are matching we've got some YouTube folk and some non-YouTube folk now. I think the more watch time your videos have, the more they're recommended. Yeah, what I was wondering, am I shooting myself in the foot with the streams? Like, should I just not stream on YouTube for the sake of my content looking better? Like, granted, they do differentiate live from non-live. You know what? This is actually pretty good. What's going on here? Bernardo Kastrup Day is popping off. I think this is just the fallout from the, like, this is all pre-video. And then this is just recent interest from the video. And then, what does this mean? Upcoming. Learning about the brain. Scheduled for October 9th. What? Can I get rid of this? Okay. And then I guess some of these views could be from afterwards, just like VODs. But just got Threadstorm and Silk. Do I remember what Threadstorm is? Threadstorm. Oh, is it the one where you're just going like all around you and it does like AoE all around lash? Yeah, that is pretty sick. That might be a goated move. And yeah, that'll help you out in all kinds of scenarios. Like I find that was definitely a top 3 like ability I think I found. Was just thinking about the Silksong streams. Yeah, those are good. Those are good times. I have the footage, and I think I'm going to slowly but surely edit a supercut of the streams. So stay tuned. Sometime in the next 10 months, I'll probably get that video out. I have to not get stun locked by consciousness. Like I genuinely got stun locked by Alex O'Connor here. Actually, no, I got stun locked by Annika Harris. Really? Like it was her discussion with Sam. I think I talked about this like 2 days ago. Her discussion with Sam that got us first looking into panpsychism, and then then the Alex O'Connor thing stun locked me, and now I'm just kind of still following through there. Bro's on the medieval monk schedule. We respect the hustle. Yeah, I've literally been like waking up early, unfortunately, which isn't that early for other people. It's like 7 a.m. And then I just come in here and I just work on this script. Did you know Alex was doing a Castro video before you started on the topic? No, so not only so I made the Alex O'Connor response before he did the Castro video, but then I didn't realize that he was doing the Castro video when we were doing the Castro day. Like this was just because I had heard so many people talk about Castro both in here and in comments. So this is just really weirdly coincidental. I don't think I'm gonna watch the Alex O'Connor Castro video unless someone like really recommends it. But like we talked about this today, Castro starts with the presupposition that consciousness is the only thing that we know to be certain. Which I mean, I understand how that's like a very intuitive thing, but at the at that bottom level where we're talking about meaning and conceptualizations and whatnot, like it's falling into it's making a fundamental error. Divine intervention, exactly. Fate, you might say. All right, we gotta stop this stream before it becomes too long for my transcription script to handle it, which is, I guess, effectively too large for my computer to handle it all in one go. Yeah, this was great. This was we got to go through the whole entire draft. I'm pretty stoked about that. Usually when we start things, we don't finish them, so oh, absolutely. Oh, is this smart detection? That's really cool. It's combating people who come in here telling people about other streams. But yeah, no, I will hop in. Yeah, thank you everyone for giving feedback here. I'm gonna just be workshopping this thing. Unfortunately we just have to grind this one out, and yeah, unfortunately I'm gonna be probably talking about this or going over it on stream still, making sure that things are sounding great to everyone. So yeah, we gotta do QA. We gotta make sure it's spiffed up before we release to the public, to the mad hounds out in the wilds. So thank you very much. Take care. Yeah, thank you very much for all the feedback. Have a good rest of the day or night.